There's no time.
The time is
13
o'clock.
Hey everybody out there, episode 178. Going back to true crime after the paranormal stuff we talked about last time. I actually thought that we had done this chode, but we hadn't.
Yeah, I can't believe we haven't done this one.
I was thinking about it the other day, like all the serial killers that we haven't got around to doing yet. And I'm like, holy crap, there's like some kind of big ticket ones that we haven't done
John
yet.
Wayne Gacy never did it.
Yeah, we haven't done John Wayne Gacy. We haven't done Ed Gein.
Yeah.
We haven't done a lot. So like I put them on the schedule like for the next couple months. But this right here is going to be about Gary Ridgway, otherwise known as the Green River Killer.
Yeah, although it was Ed Gein a serial killer, officially. Did he kill enough people? I think he only killed one, didn't he?
One or two. Yeah, he was mostly like
he was just a weird necrophile.
Yeah, which, Gary Ridgway had a little bit of that going on too. Interesting thing about this case, one, I believe if he indeed did do all the crimes that he was charged with and convicted of, that he confessed to, he is actually the United States' most prolific serial killer with 49.
Yeah.
Although he admitted to killing as many as 71. And it wouldn't shock me if that was the case. He was operating for a very long time, like before they caught him, and he seemed to like do a lot in a short span of time.
He probably doesn't know how many he killed.
I don't think he does, and I think he said that at some points. I believe he's still alive. He's in prison in Walla Walla, Washington.
Yeah.
But he said on numerous occasions that he had lost count.
Yeah.
And like I said, I believe that as well.
He wasn't going for a score. He was just trying to get off.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah.
So it's interesting because you remember a couple weeks back when I said, our friend and fan of the show, Sophie, had sent me this book, The Gates of Janus, that was written by Moore's murderer, Ian Brady. Now, he actually has a chapter in here where he talks about the Green River Killer. However, when he wrote this, it was early 2001, and Gary Ridgway had not been caught yet. So when he was talking about the Green River Killer, he was talking about someone who had not been caught.
Right.
So it was like kind of interesting. And I'll probably get into it a little bit later too, but Ian Brady believes that there was more than one killer operating in the area at the time, and that Gary Ridgway did kill a lot of them, but that there was someone else. There was at least one other killer too, because some of the modus operandi were were slightly different. But I don't know. A couple of the investigators on the case, they speculated that there could have been more than one killer, like operating in the same area, just using similar dumping grounds, or maybe one was a copycat of the other one. I don't really know if that's the case or not.
I seem to remember that.
But yeah, because like a couple of the victim profiles were different, a couple of the, modus operandi were different. But I don't know. It didn't seem different enough that it would have been two. Because serial killers, like I said, are pretty rare anyway. And to have two operating at the same time period in the same area seems far-fetched. Not impossible, but far-fetched.
It was a long time ago that I saw the particular program I'm thinking of. But I saw one where an investigator or a cop actually pointed out a couple of clusters of bodies that they had found in that same general area. But they seem to have come from a time when Ridgway could not have been active. That was like one of the things that I kind of remember, but it was a long time ago. I just remember thinking that there were some of those bodies up there. I remember, cops putting forth a pretty good case that he couldn't have done those.
Yeah.
But, that was a good place to hide bodies. That's why Gary Ridgway did it. So there may have been more than one out there, but he wasn't doing exactly what Ridgway was doing. It's just where he was putting the bodies.
Yeah, and and I'm not saying that Gary Ridgway didn't kill a shit ton of people, because he did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not like a case where, like Henry Lee Lucas or something like that, who killed maybe 3 people, but then like confessed to like 600. I don't think it was anything like that, where Gary Ridgway said, yeah, I killed, 50, 60, 70 people, and he didn't do it. I think he did kill that many.
Yeah, I'm unscripted. I'm doing this all from memory. Maybe somebody in the audience might remember the exact details. I do remember a cop pointing out a couple of those body clusters, and he was saying Ridgway couldn't have done these. And I don't remember exactly why. I think maybe he was out of town or wasn't there yet or something. It was somebody in the audience might remember the exact details. All those bodies they found out there, he didn't do them all, but he did most of them, I think.
I think he did too.
Yeah.
And I'm like I said, I wouldn't be shocked if he did do them all, because I don't know. I'm like, how likely is it that 2 serial killers were operating, like I said, in the same area during the same time period? Like I said, not impossible. It happened in, around Toronto, Ontario. It happened.
Oh, it happened a lot.
It's happened, but I don't know.
There was like a couple of parks that were famous. I think Leakin Park is one of them.
Leakin Park.
Leakin Park is one of them where it's famous. A famous body dump.
A body dumping place.
Yeah, they just find and it's outside near an urban area. It's semi-deserted. If you have a body to dump, that's the place to dump it. And they've been dumping them there for decades.
Well, and look at something like the Texas killing fields.
Yeah.
That one kind of stretch, like off those two or three major highways, where they know for a fact, I mean, they find bodies there all the time, and they know for a fact, because they've caught some of the killers, that's definitely several killers.
Yeah.
Probably truck drivers. Because they've caught a few of them, but it's like they know that, like, they'll catch one, and they'll be like, okay, well, he did, these 3, but then his DNA doesn't match, like, these other 15 over here, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not the same person. It's several people using that as a dumping ground, which is kind of terrifying. I think we did a show about Texas.
There's only been a couple confirmed truck driver serial killers in the United States, but most people agree that that's a likely job for a serial killer. That would be a good job for a serial killer, because they're always moving. Yeah,
they're always moving. And like I said, it's, they're not, they're driving through places and, like, people wouldn't recognize them because it's like, they don't.
They can kill lot lizards, and there's no connection to them.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
For those of you people outside the United States, a lot lizard, if you don't know what that is, a lot lizard is a kind of a slang term for a prostitute that specializes in the rest areas, or, where the truckers hang out.
Yeah.
It's a lot lizard.
Yeah. So before we kind of get into talking about the Green River Killer case, which has a little bit to do with Ted Bundy as well later on.
Eileen Warnos was a lot lizard, wasn't she?
I believe she was.
Yeah, because it was all damn truck drivers, I think.
Yeah.
But, yeah. Okay.
Let's do a couple of shout-outs. Got a couple Patreon shout-outs to do. I'd like to say thank you to Justin for increasing his Patreon support, so thank you very much, Justin. Also like to say hello and thank you very much to our newest patron, who is named Tammy. So hey there, you guys. Thank you very much. Any support that you guys can give us is much appreciated, even if it's not even monetary support. Could be just sharing the videos, telling other people about the show, stuff like that. We're trying to grow bigger, almost to 8,000 subscribers on YouTube, so we're kind of excited about that.
We've been averaging like a consistent 200 additional subs per month, I think, right?
Yeah.
And about 200 a month?
Yeah. So any little bit helps.
Yeah, if you guys share and recommend and talk about us, and then in the comment sections on other people's videos, send them our way, people. Yeah, everything helps.
It does indeed. All right. So I don't think, did you have any other shout outs that you wanted to do? I can't really think of anything else at the moment other than,
no.
I'm glad everybody seems to be liking the Witching Hour shows that I've been putting up. I have like a few more of those to do, and then I'm going to start recording new ones.
That was more popular than I thought it would be.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised.
Yeah, even though you told me you did some research and other channels that specialize in nothing but that can have millions of views.
Yeah.
Some of those channels.
Well, because a lot of people just like to, on your commute or when you're getting ready for bed or whatever, it's cool to just lay there and listen to creepy stories.
Yeah, I think that was a good idea.
So, it's like your mom reading to you before you go to sleep.
Yeah, if people want me to do some, I see them in the comment section want me to read.
Well, yeah, you should.
Think I should read some?
We'll have to I don't know. I'll have to think of some that you
I
could
keep
read.
A straight face.
Why?
I'm reading. I'll probably start busting out laughing at funny shit. That might make them fun, though.
I don't know.
I'll just read them as myself.
And you'll be reading, and then something will happen. You'll be like, "Oh man, that's fucked up."
Oh shit.
Probably. All right. So let's start talking about the Green River Killer case. Now, like I said, for a very long time, I mean, the crimes that, that Gary Ridgway later ended up confessing to started in the early 1980s, like right around 1982. He was actually not caught until 2001. Even though he had been on the police radar, he had actually been picked up for other things like tangentially related to the case, but they never had enough like evidence to get him. So it took him until 2001, like when DNA got good enough to link him to several of the murders, and he subsequently confessed. Like I said, he confessed to initially 48, and then he confessed to another one, so they add another. So he is actually he did that to get out of the death penalty. Yeah. So he got essentially 49 life sentences, so he's never getting out, obviously, although I believe he is still alive. I think he's 70 years old right now. So let's go back to August 15th, 1982. There's a guy named Robert Ainsworth, and he is rafting down the Green River, which is near Seattle, Tacoma, Washington State area. And this was something that he did a lot, kind of rafting down this river or whatnot. So he's going down the river, and he happens to look over the side of the boat, and he sees a face floating like right beneath the surface of the water. It was a black woman. Now, initially, he thought it was a mannequin, which I know that's terrible, but it always kind of makes me laugh because because I write about true crime cases all the time, and it's always kind of like, oh, we saw this thing on the side of the road and we thought it was a mannequin. It's never a mannequin, pro tip. Yeah. It's always a dead body. So, I mean, I'm sure sometimes it's a mannequin, but not in this case. So he thought it was a mannequin, and he tried to, snag it with the pole, and then horribly, he ended up upending the boat and falling into the water, at which point he realizes this is not a mannequin, but a dead body.
Damn, and he's not with it.
I know. And not only that, but a few seconds later, he sees another dead body, right there. So there's two of them, right in this one area. They're both young black women. So, of course, he freaks out. He swims to the river bank, and there was a truck there earlier that he had passed, and he had talked to the guys, but they were gone now. So they didn't have cell phones in 1982. So he sits there on the bank, kind of wigging out. These two kids come by on a bike, and he's like, hey, can you go get the cops? I just found two bodies. So the cops come and they find the two bodies, and then they start, kind of cordoning off the area and looking around and everything like that. At which point they found a third body. This one was actually found not in the water. It was actually found on the river bank, about less than 30 feet from where the other victims were. This girl was a bit younger than the other two. She had actually died from asphyxiation. There was a pair of blue pants or jeans tied around her neck that she had been strangled with. She had bruises all over her arms and legs, suggesting that she had struggled with her attacker. This girl was later identified as 16-year-old Opal Mills. They thought she had been dead about 24 hours, so it was fairly recent.
So they were fresh.
Yes.
And he was dumping them all there in that same area at that period.
Yes.
And they were all black.
Yeah.
So he was going on a black binge.
It's not... because, I think it was just whoever he could find. Some of the victims were black. Majority were white.
Most of them were white, yeah.
But it just seemed like whoever he could pick up. Most of them were prostitutes or teenage runaways, although some were not, which is what made some people think that maybe this was more than one killer. You know what I mean? Because some of the victim profiles were different. So that's kind of a point in that other theory's favor. So they eventually ended up identifying the other two victims as Marcia Chapman, who was 31 years old, and Cynthia Hines, who was 17. Both of these women were known to be prostitutes. Opal Mills was not. She was just a regular 16-year-old girl. So again, that's not quite the same.
Somehow talked her into his car.
Yeah, not quite the same victim profile. No. The two women that were found in the water actually had pyramid-shaped rocks stuffed up their vaginas. They're not entirely sure if that was done like as a sadistic, like or a ritualistic type of thing, or if he was trying to weigh the bodies down. Obviously that did not work because they were still floating there. So I don't know. That just seemed like a really weird detail.
Ridgway wasn't a real bright guy.
He was not.
Yeah.
He had a pretty low IQ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's pretty weird that he did that.
Yeah. And some of the other bodies were found with like some strange, like kind of ritualistically posed type of stuff going on.
He did go back and screw them after they were dead
He
pretty
did,
regularly.
yeah.
Maybe that was some kind of like sex toy he's putting up in there. It felt good.
Yeah, some people have speculated that it might have been that as well. That it might have
Yeah.
been some kind of weird
thing. You know, he's hitting that rock in there.
Yeah, which...
Weird.
Who knows? I mean, you know. And as much interviews and stuff like that as they've done with him, like you said, he's not... I mean, he was smart enough not to get caught for all that time, but he's not the brightest bulb on the tree. So he didn't really seem to have a lot of insight into why he did what he did.
Right.
You know what I mean? It seemed very surface level, like when they asked him about it. And I was even like, I watched like a whole bunch of documentaries about him and stuff. And even a lot of the investigators and people that had interviewed him said that too. They just said, you know, it's like, I don't really think he knows why he did what he did. He was just basically like, oh, I hated them and I didn't want to have to pay to have sex with them. So I just killed them.
Right.
Like it was the most natural thing ever. It was just like,
Yeah, and you know what's funny is that he was probably a little smarter than old Otis and Henry Lee Lucas.
Yeah, those two seemed really...
They were even dumber.
Yeah.
And there's this just when you look at Ridgway's case, this is what a dumb serial killer can do. They can rack up a score pretty high, like 40, 50, something like that.
Well, yeah.
And under the right circumstances. But there's no way Henry Lee Lucas could have killed those hundreds of people.
Well, yeah, we were talking about that when we
about-
were reviewing that documentary about him. It's just like, you
He'd
know...
have been caught. He's too dumb.
Yeah, and, you know, they even determined
Yeah,
that
he was lying.
that there was no way that he could have been, like, in all the places. Like I said, and even on that documentary when they had, like, they drew a map. And they're like, this is what he would have had to do in, like, X amount of time. Like, driving over here, all the way over there, all the way over there. They're like, there's just no way.
Yeah.
I do think he killed those 3 people, though.
Right.
So, Marcia Chapman, who was 31 years old, now, she had been missing for 2 weeks when they found her. She had 2 children. Now, she had been dead for over a week. So she had been in the water the longest because she was quite decomposed. Cynthia Hines had only been in the water for a couple of days. And as I said, Opal Mills had probably been on the bank for less than 24 hours. So these were not all dumped at the same time. This was like over a period of a week or 2.
Yeah, that's funny. He's dumping them all eye shot from each other. Where you can see him.
Yeah. Well, later on, when they asked him about that, he said that he liked to dump a lot of the bodies in clusters because then, like, when he was driving back, you know, back and forth, and he would, like, think of the cluster that he had left in there, and it kind of, like, made him happy thinking about it.
Okay.
You know what I mean? So, you know, even if he didn't go back to, like, revisit the bodies, you know, he just liked the thought of all of them back there.
Right.
You know? Which is fucked up.
He probably couldn't explain it.
That's what I mean. He didn't really seem to have a lot of insight into why he was doing it. He just did it because...
You thought he just didn't want to talk about it.
Yeah. Now, interestingly, these were not the first bodies that had been found in the Green River. Several days prior to this, they had found the body of a woman named Deborah Bonner. She was found nude, and she had been found slumped over a log. She had also been strangled to death. And a month before that, another young teenage girl named Wendy Cofield was also found strangled and floating in the Green River. 6 months prior to that, there had been a body of a woman or a girl named Leanne Wilcox, and she was found a few miles away, like in an empty lot. Now, the Green River killer, they do not think killed Leanne Wilcox. They think that was somebody else. But it's possible she could be connected to the case as well. Because like I said, I guess this is kind of like a remote area, and it's possible that there's more than one killer operating. So, and a lot of the girls, like I said, were runaways or prostitutes or something like that, which, that's a very dangerous profession. So it's possible that some of these were killed by other people. So they don't think that Leanne Wilcox was a victim of the Green River Killer. However, they do consider Wendy Cofield and Deborah Bonner are on the list of official Green River Killer victims. So within 6 months, there have been 6 bodies found in the river or near the river. So detectives obviously know that they have a serial killer on their hands and kind of tried to pull out all the stops in order to catch him. So they assemble a special task force to investigate the Green River murders. Now, this was the largest police task force assembled in this area since the Ted Bundy investigation, the Ted Bundy murders, which had taken place about 9 or 10 years earlier. So they had all kind of all these big names and, that had worked on the Bundy case and all this other kind of stuff were, on this particular task force. Now, apparently the investigation was kind of stymied from the start. They had like a whole bunch of information come in. There was a lot of bodies like found in a brief period of time. They had tons of different tips. And they didn't really have, it's only the early 1980s. They didn't really have a good filing system. They didn't have, So they didn't have like any way to process all of this information that was coming in. Because there was so much of it, like some of it was overlooked, some of it was lost. And it's like they had to get like volunteers to come and help them like go through all of this stuff and all this other kind of crap. So while they're investigating, detectives figured out that a lot of the girls and women that had been murdered knew each other, even if only vaguely. Most of them, like I said, had worked as prostitutes or were runaways and were running away from like abusive households and stuff like that. They had that kind of, rotten start in life. So they decide that they're going to start looking around what's called the Strip or the SeaTac Strip, Seattle-Tacoma, which is where kind of a lot of the prostitutes hung out. It was very near the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport. So there was like a lot of hotels, bars, stuff like that. And, it was a very, it was a place that prostitutes were known to frequent. So they figured they would start their investigation there. And hopefully someone had seen whoever this was that was picking these girls up. So they start interviewing like all the prostitutes that worked this same strip. At first it was a little bit problematic because, obviously a lot of prostitutes don't really want to talk to the cops, understandably. So, it was kind of hard to get information out of them. However, when they looked back through some of the older records and stuff like that, they did find some police reports that had been filed previously by prostitutes that kind of seemed significant to the case. So they had interviews with 2 separate women, both of whom had worked as prostitutes, and they said that there was a man in a blue and white truck had abducted them and tried to kill them. Now, the first of these women was named Susan Widmark. She was 21. And she said that this guy in this truck had come up. He was like a middle-aged dude. She said she got in his truck, and once she got in there, he pointed a pistol at her and then sped off down the highway. So he takes her to like this, this road out in the middle of nowhere. He turns off the engine and violently rapes her. Then after the rape, he told her to get dressed again. He started to drive away from the scene with her still in the car. Now, while they were driving, she told the police that he had talked about the Green River murders, which is, what made her think that maybe he was related to the case. Now, he was still holding the gun to her head the whole time. However, when he stopped at a stoplight, she jumped the fuck out of the car. And while the car was speeding away, she was actually able to get part of the license plate. Now, a similar thing had happened to another prostitute, Deborah Estes, who was only 15 years old. Now, she had actually filed a police report in August of 1982 and said that she had been walking down the side of the highway when a middle-aged man in a blue and white pickup truck had approached her and offered her a ride. She got in, and then the same thing happened. The man pulled out a pistol, pointed it at her, drove her to a remote area, and raped her. And then, he released her into the woods. So the task force thinks that this dude could be the Green River Killer.
Blue and white truck and both of them?
Yeah, both of these. And it was the same MO. They both got in the truck, he pulled out a gun on them, took them somewhere, raped them, and then let them go. So the cops start investigating this guy. Now, only a month later, after Deborah Estes had reported the rape, in September, this butcher named Charles Clinton Clark, he was pulled over in a blue and white pickup truck driving along Seattle's main strip. They did a background check on him and determined that he owned 2 handguns. So they figure, okay, well, maybe this is him. They get his driver's license photo. They showed it to both of the victims, and both of them identified him. Yes, this was the man that abducted and raped them. So this guy gets arrested, and they search his house and his car. They found the 2 handguns that, the women identified as the ones that had been used in the assaults. They questioned the guy, and he admitted that he had indeed abducted and raped these 2 women. So even though, they were kind of thinking, well, maybe this is the Green River Killer, but he let them go. He didn't really seem to want to kill them. He just was a rapist, which, that's bad enough. But so, you know what I mean? It's the MO wasn't really the same. And when they kind of investigated later on, they found out that this guy, when the Green River victims had disappeared, this guy had a solid alibi. He was at work or he was out of town or something like that. So they knew that he couldn't have been the Green River Killer, although he was actually charged with the rape of the 2 girls. Now, while he was being arrested, there was another woman, a 19-year-old Mary Meehan. She was taking a walk and she disappeared. Now, this girl was about 8.5 months pregnant at the time she went missing near a motel along the strip. So she actually probably had been working as a prostitute as well. I mean, that hotel that she was coming from was kind of a known prostitute, a place that prostitutes would take their clients. But she was just out walking, very heavily pregnant, and she disappeared. So at this point, they're okay, well, maybe the task force is maybe one of the, because they had a bunch of civilians to come in and help with the task force with the case because they had so much information. And they said maybe one of them is the Green River Killer because from the profiling that they, the kind of, that they had kind of done on who this guy might be, they were well, this seems like the kind of guy that would, kill people and then want to get involved in the investigation, to see what was going on and where they were going with it. So they started investigating all the volunteers that had come in to help out the task force with the Green River Killer investigation. So at this point, they find this guy who I guess had been volunteering to help them. And this guy was a taxi driver. He was 44 years old. And what ended up happening with him was that he seemed to know a lot of the victims because I guess he had worked as a taxi driver on that beat. And they thought it was suspicious that he knew so many of the victims and, all this other stuff. So they kind of started looking into that guy. Now, 2 weeks before Mary Meehan had disappeared, there were these 2 16-year-old girls named Casey Ann Lee and Terry Renee Milligan, and they also mysteriously disappeared. Both were runaways and had a history of prostitution as well. So they were also believed to have fallen victim to the Green River Killer. Now, this taxi driver that they were interviewing, John Douglas, the FBI agent, very famously, he was one of the guys that came up to, was kind of instrumental in establishing the FBI's behavioral analysis, the profiling lab. So he had actually drawn up a profile of the Green River Killer, and the taxi driver seemed pretty much just like that. Because the profile said the Green River Killer will be a middle-aged man. He will be confident yet impulsive. He will probably frequent the murder scenes, either to reenact the crimes in his mind or to revisit the bodies. He said the killer is probably familiar with the area, will probably have deep religious convictions. He also thought that the killer would probably would be really interested in police work, had either tried to be a police officer before, was like kind of a cop groupie, and thought that he might contact the police to try to help them out in the investigation. So since this taxi driver kind of had a lot of those, attributes, and also, like I said, knew a lot of the girls that had gone missing and that had turned up dead because he had worked along the strip as a taxi driver, they kept a pretty close eye on this dude. So throughout the winter of 1982, they pretty much kept him under constant surveillance, even though he was pretty adamant about saying that he was innocent and he just knew these girls because he had given them rides all the time and he had kind of gotten to know them and like be friends with them and stuff like that. So he was, very adamant that he was not the killer. Eventually they didn't have any evidence to pick him up for the murders or anything having to do with that. So they arrested him on some unpaid parking tickets that he had just so they could have him in custody so they could figure out if he was the Green River Killer or not, but they could find no solid evidence tying him to the murders, even though he did actually know 5 of the victims. Now, September 26th, 1982, they find another decomposing body. This is 17-year-old prostitute named Giselle Lovorn. Now, she had been missing for 2 months. Before somebody on a bicycle or a hiker or something like that found her nude body near kind of like a neighborhood of like old abandoned houses near the SeaTac International Airport. She had been strangled with a pair of men's black socks. Now, they said weirdly, when she disappeared, like the last time she was seen, she had blonde hair. But when they found her body, her hair had been dyed black. So they're not sure at what point that happened. So even though she was actually found by the airport and not in the river or right around the river, they thought that this was probably the same killer just because the modus operandi was the same, the victim profile was the same. Now, between September 1982 and April of 1983, 14 girls disappeared. Now, among those that disappeared, very interestingly, one of them was Deborah Estes, the 15-year-old that had reported the rape by the Clark guy. She disappeared, okay? As did 13 other girls and young women, all between 15 and 23 years old, most of whom were known prostitutes or were teenage runaways. Now, so the task force, this is kind of interesting how this happened, and they talked about this a little bit on the documentary, and this is like kind of a shame that they didn't fucking catch Gary Ridgway at this point, because this was still back in the early 80s. So what ended up happening was this girl named Marie Malvar. Now, on April 30th, 1983, her boyfriend, who was also kind of like her pimp, he sees her talking to a potential client who was in a dark-colored truck. Because he, looked out for her, he was, behind while she was, soliciting clients and stuff. So the boyfriend sees her get into the truck, and then the truck speeds off. Now, the boyfriend said it looked like Marie and the guy driving the truck were, arguing. So he got kind of worried. So the boyfriend started to follow the truck. Now, I guess the guy who was driving the truck realized that this other guy was following him and took the fuck off and ended up losing the boyfriend. the girlfriend, Marie, subsequently disappeared. So her boyfriend reported her missing to the police. Now, a few days after this incident, Marie's boyfriend and her dad were driving around the area trying to see if they could see this truck so they could figure out where Marie had gone. So they see the truck driving around, the same one, so they follow it to this house on South 348th Street. So they call the cops. So the cops show up at the house, knock on the door, ask, is this your truck? And guess who answers the door? It was Gary Ridgway. However, he denied having anything to do with Marie Malvar, the disappearance or anything like that. And the cops left it at that. They just left.
Well, I guess they knew where he lived.
Yeah, but this was 1983. They didn't catch him, if you're doing the math, till 2001.
Yeah.
But they went to his house and asked, hey, do you know where that girl is? Because her boyfriend says that she got into your truck and then she disappeared. He's like, nope, don't know anything about it. And the cops were like, okay, bye, have a nice day.
They didn't have enough to do any kind of convictions or make an arrest. It had to be.
I guess not. But
yeah,
it's just like,
what
I saw that.
What jurisdiction was this again?
This is Seattle.
Okay.
Right around Seattle. But
it's hard to believe that all that shit was going on in Seattle back in the 80s. All these, runaways and underage prostitutes and shit.
Yeah.
That's not everywhere in the United States. I guess it's only in certain trouble spots.
Well, it's any big city.
Yeah, or outside of cities that are crumbling.
Yeah.
Crumbling economies and stuff.
I mean, that doesn't really... I mean, that's not so much...
you don't see that around here.
That doesn't explain... Well, yeah, but we live kind of like in an upper-class neighborhood.
Yeah, well, even you can go on the other side of Orlando, and that's not really going on. Airline Drive, that isn't going on. That's where all the hookers are.
Well,
I don't think there's underage hookers on airline drives. I don't think the cops would tolerate it.
I don't know about that.
Yeah?
I mean, I think some of that was going on in Daytona.
Yeah?
And I'm sure it probably goes on in Orlando too. It's just you don't see it.
You just don't notice it as much.
You don't notice it because it's not like you're down there like soliciting the shit as far as I know. So it
must be in special places where only the underground knows.
Yeah, maybe. I don't really know. But yeah, so...
I mean, it's not like you drive around and see it.
No.
You know?
Well, and nowadays you probably wouldn't as much anyway, just because of like...
They do it online.
Online and stuff like that. So you wouldn't see it as much, I would assume.
They do it over their phones.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the shitty thing. They did actually go to Gary Ridgway's house because, because they had recognized his truck. But he said he didn't have anything to do with it, and they couldn't, they didn't have a warrant or anything, so they couldn't go in there. So another prostitute also disappeared in April. This was a girl named Kimmy Kai Pitzer. Now, her pimp also saw her getting into a dark green pickup truck with an attached camper. He said he kind of got a look at the driver. He said he had a pockmarked face. He saw the two of them drive off, and then he never saw Kimmy again. He did report her disappearance to the police, but for some reason, the police didn't really link the two crimes. I'm not entirely sure why. So, at this point... Spring of 1983, all of these girls had disappeared, all of these bodies had been found, and the investigation really didn't seem to be going anywhere. They were still looking at the taxi driver, but like the longer it went on, they were kind of realizing, look, it's probably not this guy. They kind of kept him as a prime suspect for the moment, but it's like they were getting less and less confident that that's who the killer was. No new leads were emerging. Prostitutes still kept disappearing, and it seemed like they couldn't do anything about it. The task force was having a hard time, like, keeping up with all of the new information that was coming in and all this other kind of stuff. So it seemed like it was all kind of collapsing, and no one was, nothing was getting done, and everyone seemed like they were getting really frustrated. And everyone was getting very angry at them. Like, the public was getting very angry at them. There was a lot of... speculation. I don't know if this is entirely fair, but a lot of people in the public, and especially a lot of women that worked as prostitutes, were saying that the police didn't really give a shit because the victims were prostitutes, and if it had been, other types of women, that like maybe they would have tried harder. But I don't know about that because I have seen like interviews with people that were on the task force, and they did genuinely seem to be, I mean, they're like, we were trying our hardest. There was just so much information, and it's like we didn't, we didn't have any leads. We didn't really know what to do, and it's like everything was really disorganized, and it seemed like they were really frustrated by the whole thing.
When you're dealing with prostitutes and trying to do an investigation happening in the world of prostitution, those cops are always at a disadvantage.
Mm-hmm.
There are too many goddamn suspects, none of them connected to the girl.
Yeah.
They don't even have the crime scene. They may have the body where it was dumped, but they don't even know where it happened.
Yep.
Maybe it happened in somebody's car, and they don't have the crime scene, so you can't locate who did it.
Yeah.
So,
like I said, I mean,
all this, it's just because we're hookers. I never buy that.
I mean,
the cops will put anybody behind bars that they can. They want to get that damn arrest credit.
Yeah,
right?
and it really did. I mean, particularly in this case, like I said, it really did seem like the people that were on the task force were really, really trying, and were really upset by the lack of progress on the case. But like you said,
they're
serial
jumping into
killers,
random dudes' cars fucking 10, 15 times a night. You can't figure out which one of those guys
That's what I
did
mean. And if serial killers, particularly that target prostitutes or runaways or, hitchhikers or something like that, not only is there no connection between the killer and the victim, but it's like sometimes
no witnesses, there's no murder
sometimes
scene.
There's no witnesses. It's like sometimes the women were runaways or they lived alone. Sometimes they were never reported missing.
Sometimes they can't even ID them.
Right, and indeed some of the victims, I believe it's 4 or 5 of the Green River Killer victims are still not identified because they were already skeletons by the time they were found. So it's just a really sad situation all around, and it's like, you can blame the cops for doing some dumb things. And actually, when they did do, kind of like an analysis, Bob Keppel, who they brought in to kind of try to codify everything and like try to put everything together, he actually was quite critical of like the way the investigation had been conducted so far. So there was some shit going on both sides, but I don't think it was anything to do with them being like not caring about the victims or anything like that. I think it was just regular. They were just overwhelmed with all the number of murders that, and just the number of leads, the number of witness statements, the number of suspects. It's just like,
and it's all inconsequential shit. None of it points to a damn suspect.
Right. And like I said,
this one, that one, this one, that one, this one, that one. But then you investigate. There's nothing to investigate. You don't even know where they were killed. Yeah. It's just all dead ends. So, no.
And you have to look, and you have to investigate everything, and it's like there's only so many people, and, you never know, like, what is going to be important and what's not going to be important. So you have to, like, look up everything. So I can understand, I'm not, like, the world's biggest fan of cops, but I'm just saying that in this case, I do think they tried their hardest. It was just that circumstances intervened, they fucked up. It's like everybody fucks up, and it sucks, but that it took so long for them to catch him. But shit happens. I mean, too, and this was like the early 1980s. They didn't have the internet. They didn't have cell phones. They didn't have like all the shit, all the, forensic techniques that they have now. So it was much more difficult for them. They were coming at it from like a big disadvantage, Yeah. So I can't blame them entirely. Even though, like I said, when I saw that shit in the documentary about how they actually went to his house and we're all just like, oh, well, I guess it's not him because he said it wasn't. It's like that just kind of made me mad. So like I said, Bob Keppel, the guy that they brought in to kind of kick him in the pants, like kind of like get the investigation back on track, get it together and stuff like that. He actually ended up writing a book later on called The Riverman. And he kind of made recommendations for like a bunch of different changes that would have to be made. He's like, everything was just a complete mess. It's just like there was, I don't even remember how many people were on the task force, but it's just like they were all over the place. It's like, they were all trying to do everything like all at once. He's like, one thing we need to do is kind of like get all these cases together, like put all the similar ones together and the dissimilar ones together. And he's like, assign each person like their own task instead of just everybody trying to like do all different types of things. He's like, that's just really disorganized. So he'd have like one person sorting out forensic stuff and one person, you know, interviewing prostitutes and one person like keeping track of all the suspects and one person. So everybody just had their own job, which wasn't being done prior to that. So like I said, it was kind of really in disarray. So yeah, this investigation was costing like millions and millions of dollars. And like I said, the public was getting really, really annoyed about it. So May 8th, 1983, yet another body was discovered. This was 21-year-old Carol Ann Christensen. She was actually found in a wooded area near Maple Valley by a family who were out looking for mushrooms. This is another case where, because remember the first bodies that were found with like rocks stuck up their vaginas? Okay. Yeah. This girl was found with her head covered with a brown paper bag. They took the brown paper bag off and the killer had put a fish on top of her neck, like had placed it there. He also put another fish on her left breast and left a bottle between her legs. Her hands were crossed over her stomach, and on the top of her left hand was like a little pile of freshly ground beef. Isn't that weird?
Yeah.
She had been strangled with a cord.
Where'd you get the beef?
Who knows?
Damn.
Piggly Wiggly.
Piggly Wiggly. Damn.
I don't think they have Piggly Wiggly.
They got Piggly Wiggly. Where's this, New Hampshire? No,
Seattle.
Seattle? Yep.
I don't think they have Piggly
They're in
Wiggly.
Washington. Piggly Wiggly.
Yeah.
So it's just raw beef?
I guess.
It must have been cooked beef out of something that she had.
Well,
Like
yeah,
some
but it was
taco
like
meat.
on top of her hand, like
Put
like that, and like he put it on, like it was
He
ritualistic.
put some little taco meat on there.
That's like
And
that's
then the
so
fish,
fucked up.
fish there and a fish
A
there.
fish on the neck and a fish on the boob.
Yeah, and he put a bag over her head.
Yeah,
It's just some weird shit. He's trying to be artistic.
I guess.
You know, it's, trying to be artistic.
Isn't that fucking good? It's just
Yeah.
bizarre. The weird thing about her body was that even though she was found like on land, it looked like her body had been in the water for a little while beforehand. Like they'd been in the water and then had been taken out and left there.
Maybe he washed her.
It maybe, but I don't know. I don't know if they can tell. I mean, I'm pretty sure they can tell if the body has been in the water for like an extended period of time or if it's just like a washing thing.
He probably washed her.
But it was really weird because this was like miles away from the river, so it just seemed very.
He put her in a car.
Yeah, I guess so.
And took her out there. Yeah.
Yeah. So, spring and summer of 1983, 9 more young women, many of whom were prostitutes, disappeared. Most of them were between the ages, I believe the youngest was 15, and the oldest was 22. Some of them, though, it's like most of these were put on kind of the list of, they had like a list of like official Green River, but then they had some that were not put there because I guess they had established like a parameter for like where the bodies could be dumped. And it's like the ones within this parameter are the Green River killers, but ones outside of that weren't, which to me seems a little arbitrary because it's like, cars are a thing.
Yeah.
And if Gary Ridgway did actually kill all of the people that he said that he killed, because they found a few bodies in Oregon, and he did later say that he had taken them to Oregon in a car, like, and dumped them there, like, specifically in order to confuse the police. So like I said, I don't think that the fact that they were found outside of these arbitrary bounds of these are in here are the Green River Killer murders. Like I said, I'd be more willing to listen to it if the modus operandi was drastically different. But if you're finding bodies like within a state or two that are killed pretty much exactly the same and it's the same victim profile and stuff like that, I think chances are it's probably the same killer and they're just driving farther afield in order to confuse the investigation. I mean, that's what I would think.
Depends on how many active serial killers they had at one time in that state.
True.
I've heard that, what was it, each state would you average in 1 or 2?
Yeah. Probably, which is kind of horrifying to think about. I mean, states are big and everything, but it is kind of scary to think that there's like 1 or 2 of these motherfuckers like
in every state. Yeah.
Florida's we probably got more than our fair share, I would think.
Yeah.
Fucking Florida, man.
I
got
don't know. I'm not
Florida
hearing much
mans.
about it. Are you? I'm not really hearing much
Not
about
really.
that.
I haven't really heard about. I mean, they're still around, obviously, but
I think they're an endangered species.
yeah, you just don't hear about. And we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
You just don't really hear about it in the same way that you used to.
I don't think. I don't think with the environment that creates these guys is around anymore.
Yeah.
So it's less likely that they appear. Now, some guys that we've known, that we've been on other shows, they said, like, well, maybe the serial killer is going away, but the mass shooter is taking its place. I said, no, it's a totally different psychology.
It is. That is a totally different.
The mass type shooters and the mass killers have always been there. It goes all the way back hundreds of years.
Yeah.
It's just that the tools that they use were different. And a lot of it has to do with high school environment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's kids fucking with each other, and then one of them blows a gasket, and they're not locking them up like they used to. They used to lock them up.
Yeah.
You know?
But, okay, so, like I said, there's kind of like, they're finding of this alarming, like, number of bodies, and some of them are considered Green River killer victims, and some not so much. As the summer of 1983 went on, several more bodies were discovered. In June, they found a set of unidentified remains, thought to be a 17 to 19-year-old white woman. August 11th, they found a woman named Shonda Summers, who had been missing for quite a while. She was one of the ones that had gone missing, like, during one of the earlier rashes of disappearances. They found her near SeaTac Airport. Also near SeaTac Airport, I believe it was the following day, they found yet another body, which I believe at this stage is unidentified. Fall and winter of 1983, there was a bunch more disappearances and a bunch more bodies. So between September and December of 1983, 9 more women went missing and 7 bodies were discovered. All of these were considered to be victims of the Green River Killer. Again, these were mostly prostitutes or runaways. The ones who, I have all their names and stuff like that, but it just seems like I don't want to, like, do this big long litany of them. But they did find some of the bodies that were found. 17-year-old Dolores Williams. She had actually been missing since March 8th, 1983. She was found at Star Lake. They actually ended up finding, because like I said, the first victims were Green River. Then there were some, like, by the airport. There were also several found in and around Star Lake. So they found Dolores Williams, and then the same day they found another body in Star Lake of Gail Matthews, who was 23 years old. The next few months, 5 more bodies were discovered. This is a lot of bodies.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I'm saying? This is a lot of people. October 15th, they found the skeletal remains of Yvonne Antosh. She had gone missing on May 31st. She was actually one of the few victims that had a missing persons report filed on her. As I said, a lot of these women were prostitutes and so were not reported missing. 12 days after that, they found a partially buried skeleton of a woman named Constance Neon, and she was also found near SeaTac Airport. So what they decided to do was they said, okay, well, since we're finding so many bodies in this one area, they said, we're going to, like, spread out. They got the fucking teenage explorer Boy Scouts out there to help them out. They're going to do this big, huge search to see if they could find any more bodies around the airport. And indeed, they did find one. Kelly Ware, 22. They found her skeleton covered with trash underneath some bushes, like one of the Boy Scouts found her. Before the year was out, 2 more bodies were found. November 13th. Following a search of several lots surrounding the area south of the airport, they found Mary Meehan, who had gone missing she was the 8.5 months pregnant woman who had gone missing several months before. These were the only victims, her and her unborn baby, were the only victims that were entirely buried. Some of the victims were partially buried, but most of them, like, they were usually, like, in the water, or they were just kind of dumped or just, like, covered up with leaves or something like that, but she had actually been buried. They actually found, like, some kind of weird things around her body, like a couple pieces of plastic. They found this big clump of hair, like near the pubic area of her body. They found a patch of skin attached to her skull that had fibers on it. They found 3 small bones, which presumably were not hers, 2 halves of yellow pencils, and some clear plastic tubing. So I don't know what all that shit was used for, but they found that with her body as well. December 15th, they found the skull of Kimmy Kai Pitzer, who had gone missing several months previously. She was found near Mountain View Cemetery. So it seemed like this was the 5th dumping ground. Because like I said, he liked to dump the bodies in, he called them clusters.
Yeah.
And this was actually the 5th cluster that they had discovered. Pretty much every time they found one body, if they spread out and looked around, they'd find at least one other one.
Yeah.
So he was like picking different places, and that was like his dumping ground for those months or whatever, and he would just like go and dump them there.
Well, you know he's having sex with the dead bodies. I mean, he admits this.
Yeah.
So maybe he'd like to have sex with one dead body and look at another one.
It could be, yeah.
So maybe that's why, he maybe didn't want to say that, but that might be what the cluster is all about.
Yeah, maybe he liked it, like he thought it was an audience or
like
something.
Like it was almost group sex.
Because after
might be like group sex between dead people.
Well, and this might be significant too, is that after they caught him, when they interviewed like his ex-wives and his girlfriends and stuff like that, they said one of his big things was he liked to have sex with them out in the woods or in public. Like he liked to be watched. Yeah. So maybe that's something to do with it. Right. I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, that sounds kind of legit. Yeah,
that's what he's doing.
So 2 weeks after...
See, you got to put yourself in the place of the perv.
So, yeah.
You got to put yourself in the place of the perv.
I have a hard time doing that, I guess. Which I guess that's good. I mean, you know what I mean.
Well, I'm just trying to think.
Why would he...
You know me, I'm not into them dead women.
Well,
but I'm trying to imagine, you know what I mean? What's this guy? What is this guy getting off into? So I'm trying to imagine these women as, what I would be into, which is like living hot women. You know what I mean? Yeah. So they'd be like, well, there's 4 of them. Yeah. It's me and these 4 chicks. You know what I mean? It's like some out of a damn porn movie. Yeah. You know what I mean? But in his twisted mind, though, it's better that it's 4 dead ones.
Because they can't answer back.
Well, he can imagine the situation to be whatever he wants. Because, when you know who Gary Ridgway is, he's a fucking little weasel. Yeah. All right. Yeah. I mean, he's not even intimidating. Yeah. I would beat that dude to death. Yeah. Okay.
I wish somebody had.
That's just a little fucking, you know what I mean? The cops I saw the damn video of his initial interviews. Interrogations really what they were, but they call them interviews. And you could just see the fear inside Ridgway when the cops just starts questioning him. The dude's just melting. You know what I mean? The dude is a fucking beta, big time beta. And the cops, I remember the cops, commenting. They said that they were just surprised about what a weak man he was. He was just very, very weak. When
I was watching the documentaries, a lot of them said like the first time they saw him they were surprised. Yeah. Which to me is very weird because it's always kind of like what do you expect him to look like a werewolf or like really big? You don't really see. I mean, serial killers, not always. I mean, with the possible exception of Ed Kemper, you don't usually see serial killers as they're not usually big burly dudes. They're usually just regular. They're either small or they're just like regular, normal-looking dudes. That's what makes them so scary.
Well, you see
because they look like a normal person.
You see all these dead bodies and all this damage that this dude has done. You know what I mean? You're a cop and you're seeing all these bodies. And in your mind, you're expecting fucking Jason.
That's what I mean. And it's like you'd think they'd know better, but I mean, I guess I can understand the psychology behind it, but.
You're like this
because you've built up, you don't know who it is for years and years and years. So you've built up.
Yeah, you built up all this fucking fear in your head, the horror.
What this guy might look like. And then you finally see him.
And you're like, it's that?
Yeah, because a lot of the detectives said that. They're like, that's him? Yeah. It's like they couldn't believe it. Because it's like, they said he looked so normal. Like, he was, he's kind of small. He's kind of a small dude. And they're like, and then he acted normal. They said they said if you didn't know that he was a serial killer, it's like you probably like the guy. He seemed totally nice, normal. It's like he just seemed like a completely normal person.
He didn't seem
He had a
normal
job. He had a wife. He had everything. He had a kid.
He didn't seem normal to me.
No, I'm just saying they're like, in general, you would never guess that dude was a serial killer.
He seemed very beta, very meek and pathetic. That's just what he would look. And he was just like, and he was in horror of being around those cops.
Yeah.
He was in horror. That's kind of funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're like, dude, man, you've done all these crimes and you're not ready to fucking face the police? They're not going to kill you. And this dude was terrified.
I don't even think they think of it because, like, like I said, Gary Ridgway particularly was not a smart person.
Yeah.
I think he really did not seem... I mean, prostitutes to him were... He just hated them. They were just objects to be used. He could do whatever he wanted to them. And he said as much in those very words. So...
That's what he said. That's what I don't think.
No, I'm just saying I don't think he saw them as people, so it's almost kind of like...
That motherfucker was lying. If you ask me, you know what I think happened? I think, first of all, I think those hookers dominated him. That's what I think. I think they pushed him around. And then he got fucking pissed off and snapped and would kill him. That's what I think happened. I think those tough-ass hookers that see that weak motherfucker and just kind of boss him around and push him around. He's like, oh, you think you can push me around? And then he kills him. That's what I think really happened.
It could be.
You can't trust these dudes to tell the truth.
Well, that's true.
All right, you can't trust them to tell the truth.
Yeah.
I think what they did is they saw the guy as just a mark, and would start pushing him around, dominating him, and he'd probably go through with it. Okay, and then, fuck it, I'm gonna kill her. You know what I mean?
It seems like it does seem like what. He used that, though, to his advantage. Like, they said that's why it was so easy for him to pick up women, because...
He looked harmless.
Like, he looked harmless. And also another thing that he would do, too, he would do, like Bundy would do, where he would, like, show him a picture of his kid. He did have a kid.
Yeah.
That wasn't bullshit. So he would, like, disarm them to be like, look, I'm a family man. I wouldn't do anything to hurt you or anything like that. So he was aware that that's how he was coming across, and that's how... Like, he did kind of, like, cultivate that, like, to get them to get in the car with him.
I just got a feeling that, they bossed Ridgway around. I just think they did. And
maybe.
Then anger would build up, and he'd kill him.
Yeah.
That's what I think would happen.
Yeah.
And so, I'm a man! You know what I mean? One of those kind of guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Little fragile ego.
Yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah.
Just saying, man, I wasn't there. But I have a feeling.
Yeah.
I have a feeling that's probably... But, looking at him and seeing his mannerisms, I think it was like that.
Yeah.
These girls were streetwise, and he really wasn't.
Although a lot of the girls he picked up were young.
They were young, yeah. But he felt like he could handle them, though.
Yeah, 15, 16 years old.
He could handle them, though.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. So a lot of them weren't as, hardened.
I think by the time he got to those, he was already experienced killer.
Yeah.
I think he started off with fucking tough-ass fucking broads, pushed them around, and then I'm going to kill you.
Yeah.
And then he started seeing them all like that. It's probably something like that.
Yeah.
Almost kind of like an Eileen Wuornos, but a male version of it.
Yeah. So,
because she was like that. She was started off as a victim, and then she became a perpetrator. She became a killer.
Yeah.
Eileen.
Yeah. We haven't done her yet either.
Yeah.
We got to do that as well.
Yeah, she's from around here.
Well, yeah, I've driven past the bar where she used to hang out.
That hotel where
she hung out in Daytona, and I grew up there.
Yeah, that hotel in Daytona where she used to live at. We had to drive up there and do a show there. This is the hotel.
Actually, we probably should.
Yeah.
I mean, we live literally like 25 minutes away from Daytona. Yeah. And like I said, I was born there. I grew up in Daytona Beach. So everybody knew about Aileen Wuornos.
Yeah.
Because she used to hang out there. So I knew some people that like kind of knew her or had seen her around before she got arrested. So 2 weeks after Kimmy's body was found, the Green River Task Force increased by more than half. They recruited like way more officers. Because there were so many more murders happening in the area. So at this point, the official count of Green River victims, because like I said, now there had been like a lot of disappearances, but some of the bodies had not been found yet. So at this point, the official count of the Green River victims was 11 or 12. However, there had been 18 bodies found in this particular area. Why some of these were considered official Green River Killer victims and some of them were not is not entirely clear. But at this point, 18 bodies and many, many more disappearances, which some of whom would later be found and would be attributed to the Green River Killer also. All right, so we are we are at the hour mark right now, so let's take a break so we can refill drinks, try to find the kitty, various other things. When we come back, we will talk some more about Gary Ridgway, aka the Green River Killers. We'll be back in just a few minutes.
What's up? Hi, sweetie. Jump up on Mama's desk. You jumped up on Mama's desk. Yeah. How you doing, little one? How you doing this morning? Oh, you're such a good girl. Such a good girl. Look at her little butt sticking up in the air. Your butt is so funny. I don't know why. Oh my goodness. How can you be sleepy? You just got up. You just got up. Yeah. Yeah. Where you going? Where you going? Oh, my finger's in there. Don't eat. Please don't eat that. Okay. No chewing on metal, okay? That's bad for your teeth. You exploring? You exploring? I see you exploring. You gonna climb all over the desk, yeah? Look at her tail. Your butt just makes me laugh. I don't know why. You have the funniest butt ever. Yeah. Please don't eat that. Please don't eat that. Don't you like your chicken chew sticks anymore? I bought you all those chew sticks and you don't even chew on them. How about you? You just gonna eat the paper? You eating paper? What you doing? What you doing? Okay. You're just gonna chew on everything, I see. You're in a chewy kind of mood. You're in a chewy kind of mood. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I'll stop filming so I can pet you, alright? Alright, here we go.
You love true crime. I love true crime. And I've spent the last 3 years compiling a series of the most intriguing unsolved murders of the 20th century. It's called The Faceless Villain, and Volume 3 is available now. Featuring such fascinating cases as the Ketty murders, the Carrie Babies case, the Frog Boys, the Alcasar murders, and the Inokashira Park dismemberment incident, The Faceless Villain Volume 3 is an involving exploration of unsolved slayings spanning the years from 1980 to 1999. Pick up your copy in print or ebook formats on Amazon, or download the audiobook version from audible.com, and get ready for a chilling journey through modern crime history. Okay, we're back. Talking about the Green River Killer, aka Gary Ridgway. Tom has refilled his drink.
Yeah, it's still weak. It's weak, though.
We found out where the kitty got away to.
Yeah. She showed up at the front door. How you doing, Daddy? Walked in like nothing.
Yeah, she's like, I don't know why were you calling me?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I didn't want her like going over to hang out because the neighbors are...
They're over there barbecuing.
They're over there barbecuing.
Yeah, they know about her, though. We got new neighbors. They moved in next door.
Yeah, they just moved in the other day. So we were kind of like, hey, if you see a little gray kitty with a stumpy tail, she's ours. And she likes to like hide in other people's bushes.
Yeah.
So don't be alarmed. But yeah, so, okay. So January of 1984, the Green River Task Force comes under the leadership of a new guy, Captain Frank Adamson. Now, he was previously the head of the Internal Affairs Unit, and he took a lot of the recommendations of Bob Keppel, who had said, you know, you need to like whip this shit into shape, like get everything organized and stuff like that. So he's kind of the one that he moved the task force closer to the airport, so they would be closer to where most of the bodies had been found, the more recent bodies had been found. He also like made everybody like took all the detectives and stuff like that and put them in teams, and they each had a task rather than having everybody run around like chickens with their heads cut off, like trying to do all things at once. So everybody had their own job and everybody knew like what the structure was. So that seemed to like improve. They also kind of went through a lot of these suspects and were trying to put them in groupings like, you know, the A group, which was like most likely suspects, B group, which were kind of like, oh, maybe, and then C group, which was like, maybe not, but we're still going to like look out on them, stuff like that. They also started like monitoring the strip, you know, more closely, like keeping tabs on all the prostitutes and stuff like that to make sure like they knew where they were going and all this other kind of stuff. So they kind of got like all of their shit together. So, even though it seemed like they still weren't catching anybody and they didn't really seem that much closer to catching anybody, they did kind of have a profile of the guy. They did kind of determine some patterns and things like that. So, they were kind of, working and getting shit done. So, however, what ended up happening then was on Valentine's Day of 1984, they found yet another body, the skeletal remains of a woman who was later identified as Denise Plager. Now, she was actually found 40 miles from the city, near Interstate 90. So she was the first victim to be found that year, but there would be more to come. Over the next 2 months, 9 more bodies would be found. Like, it just kills me that it's like, this is only a couple of years. I mean, it's like 1982 to 1984 was kind of like when he was the most active. And within like a couple of months, he's killing like 9 people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So this isn't some guy that's like killing one and then like he takes like a few months off. He's like...
He's doing it regularly.
Regularly, like killing... And like I said, I think probably he's killed a lot more women and they just never found them, to be honest with you.
He didn't know how many he killed.
He didn't. He said he lost count. And I believe it. I believe it.
I think it's about 70.
That's what he thought. He thought it was 71.
So, yeah.
That's what he said. Okay. He was ultimately charged with 49. That they actually had other corroborating evidence other than just his confession. To suggest that he had done it. But of all the ones he was saying, it was more like 71. And that would not surprise me if that was the case.
What's funny is that these dudes can do this and forget how many it was and be able to sleep at night.
Yeah.
Like it was no big deal.
Yeah. And
I would be like, they're closing in on me. They're going to get me any day.
Yeah. He really didn't seem bothered.
No.
Like I said, he had a family. He had, he had a wife. He had a kid. He had a job. He had the same job for like 30 years.
I guess he was just too simple to even worry about it. Oh, they'll never catch me.
I kind of feel like maybe that's what it was.
They'll never catch me.
Because he really seemed kind of unconcerned.
Yeah.
Even when they caught him, he was just kind of like,
they will never know. He's one of those guys.
But yeah.
I'm too smart for them.
Dumb people always think they're smart. But yeah, they do seem to. It seems like the dumber they are, the smarter they think they are. But, because I guess if you're dumb...
Couldn't have been that dumb, though. He's killed 70 of them and got away with it for a while.
True. But like I said, I don't know if that's entirely intelligence or if, like, some of it's just luck. And like I said, because it's hard to investigate...
It's his M.O.
A killer that
it just kills
doesn't have any
and I don't even think he looked at it or thought of it that way. That was just the only way he could do it. Yeah. Those are the only women that could get in his car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I think he just went after them because it was easy.
Yeah, it wasn't a master plan.
Although he did have a thing for prostitutes. His dad had as well, which we'll kind of get into in a bit. But yeah, so they did find like some distinct patterns that had emerged in these particular crimes. As I said before, he seemed to have several dumping grounds. They found 5 of them with clusters. They said pretty much all the bodies except for Mary Meehan, the pregnant woman, they were partially buried or were just laying there like covered with garbage or leaves or something like that. She had been fully buried. They actually, interestingly, where all the bodies were found, they said when they mapped them out, it made kind of like a rough triangle shape. So they thought probably the killer lived within that triangle somewhere because he was obviously very familiar with the area. Because a lot of the places where he dumped the bodies were sort of remote, like not like someone that was just driving through there would be able to find. Now, when they found some skeletal remains of some of the victims in April of, I believe, 1983 or 1984, they also found some shoe impressions. So that was some more evidence. They said they were walking shoes, size 10 or 11. So that was some more physical evidence that they could kind of keep. Now, this was kind of an interesting anecdote that I read, but I don't think they mentioned this on the documentary, but I found this on like the serial killer library or something like that. So apparently in mid-April of 1984, there was a woman who was working as a volunteer for the task force, and she was also a psychic, or so she claimed. Her name was Barbara Kubik Pattern, And she actually had a vision that another woman's body would be found near Interstate 90. So she called the cops and told them about this vision. The police, understandably, didn't really do anything about it. So the woman and her daughter decide they're going to go out there and look for a body themselves. So following her intuition and, what she had seen in her vision, her and her daughter went out to look for a body, and guess what? They found one. But it's like, I don't know if it was because she was really psychic or if it's just, there were so many fucking bodies that it's like inevitable that they would find it if they looked in that area. I don't really know. So yeah, they did find a body. They went to, they drove to like where the cops were looking for like other bodies, like in another part. And they were like, hey, check it out. We found one. The police didn't believe them. So they actually went to, and the cops were like, get it. This is like a restricted area because we're looking for bodies to get the fuck out of here or we'll arrest you. So she got mad. So she went and talked to reporters and said, hey, we found a body over here. Want to go get the scoop or whatever. So after that, the cops were like, okay, fine, we'll come look. And then they came and found the body. Now, these remains were pretty much completely decomposed. These belong to a woman named Amina Agashev. Now, she was very unlike the regular victim profile. She was 36 years old, much older than most of the other victims. She was not a prostitute. She actually worked at a restaurant in downtown Seattle and had last been seen on July 7th, 1982, just walking down the street after work, and had vanished after that.
He just gave her a ride home.
So whether she was a victim of the Green River Killer, or that's kind of still debatable because she was really not the victim profile. However, that doesn't mean that he didn't just see an opportunity. She was just walking home from work.
So he never admitted killing her.
That one I'm not really sure. Right. She also, she had 2 kids. I don't think she was married, but she had like a steady boyfriend at the time. So she wasn't like a transient or anything like that. She was like a normal
didn't do that one.
person. So that one's like questionable.
I bet you he didn't do that one.
And also the body, they did find another Green River Killer victim out in that area because this was like 40 miles away from, the normal dumping grounds. But they did find another body out there in that same area that they think was Green River Killer. So it could kind of go either way. It does seem strange that she did not fit the victim profile at all, really. But it's not impossible. Maybe he was just driving around. He had killed another prostitute and then he just saw another woman walking around and said, hey, I'm going to get her too. Maybe he thought she was a prostitute. Maybe, who knows? I don't really know.
It would have been too difficult.
But I don't know. Maybe not. It just seemed really...
A prostitute will go willingly with you to a location that's secluded and you can kill her.
Yeah.
That's what Gary was into, that he knew he could do that.
Yeah.
Just seeing some girl walking down the street, hey, you need a ride home, and then, yeah, sure, she gets in the car and then he starts driving her out to a remote distance. She's going to fucking split.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yelling, screaming, causing all kind of noise, jumping out at the fucking every stoplight. It wouldn't work. He didn't do that one. It was somebody that knew her killed her, I bet.
Maybe someone was stalking her or something like that.
Or there's somebody from the restaurant.
Yeah, it could have been.
Like a normal customer that she knew.
Like I said, I feel like a lot of the ones that happened when we did that show about like Toronto, Ontario, I think like a lot of those were... particularly there was ones where like the girl like worked at some store and like all these creepy old dudes would like hang out in there. So I feel like there's, especially if you work somewhere and you're kind of pretty and stuff, like you get these regulars that come in and they're like creepy and watching you and stuff. So I feel like that kind of situation.
That's probably what happened.
So that maybe is what happened in this. She is kind of considered a Green River Killer victim because the MO was very similar. And she was found in the place, very similar to the place where another body was found too. But like I said, because the victim profile was so different, some people have expressed doubt over whether Gary Ridgway killed her or not. So May 26th, there were 2 kids playing out on a road called Jovita Road, and they discovered yet another skeleton. This was a 15-year-old girl named Colleen Brockman. She was a runaway. So this is like pretty much, I don't even know how many bodies we're at now. So at this stage, following the discovery of Brockman's body it seemed like the murders were slowing down. You know what I mean? They weren't finding as many, because you have to think that, like I said, some of the disappearances, like some of the bodies that they found were like of women that had disappeared like years before. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like, it seems like a lot of bodies are being found, but not all of them had been killed that recently. Like some of them, it was like the year before or several months before or something like that. But so at this stage, the murders seemed like they were kind of winding down a little bit. But the task force was still kind of going full bore. Now in August of 1984, they had 2 inmates in San Francisco. They were in jail in San Francisco, and they confessed to the Green River murders. However, police got super excited about it, but then they went down there to interview them and determined that they could not have been responsible, that they were just like, I guess they just wanted to get famous or whatever. Several months after that, Ted Bundy, who at this point was in his cell on death row, he offered to help out in the investigation. He thought he could give some insight into, because he was kind of from that area as well. He was in Florida at this point, obviously, because he was in prison. But he thought he could give some insight into this guy and maybe help with the profiling and stuff.
Called him a bottom feeder.
He
called him a bottom feeder. He's
So obviously they weren't going to fly Bundy's stupid ass out to fucking Seattle, but he kind of communicated with the task force with like letters and phone and stuff like that. So Bundy thought that whoever this killer was, because like I said, they didn't know who he was at this point. He said that, I think that the killer knows these victims, at least by sight, or is at least kind of friendly with them. This is somebody that frequents these prostitutes, has befriended them. They have no reason to fear him, obviously. Ted Bundy also seemed to think that just like this killer has probably killed a lot more people than the bodies that you have found, and that probably you will never find all of them. He also believed that the pattern of the disposal of the bodies were kind of getting close to where the killer lived. Because like I said, it seemed like, Green River, and then it was like the airport, and then it was like, that lake or whatever, like Star Lake or whatever. So Ted Bundy thought that, the body dumps seemed like they were getting farther away, but he's like, I think they're getting more toward where he lives. Because he thought that when the killer first started killing, he was going farther afield to dump the bodies so they wouldn't find it. But he was getting more confident, so he was getting closer to his house.
Was it true?
I'm not really sure, because where they found him, I don't really know. I'm not familiar with the Seattle area, so I'm not really sure like how close where he lived was to where the farthest bodies away were. So even though like Ted Bundy, he was kind of like a big consultant on the case and everything like that, and helped with the profiling, but he didn't really like help all that much, because I feel like they already had a profiler. Yes, the profiler is not a serial killer, and sometimes serial killers have more of an insight into stuff than maybe someone who's not a serial killer, but I'm not really sure how helpful he was in the investigation.
A good cop could do the same thing.
And although something good did come out of it, because during the course of him like helping out with the Green River investigation, he did actually confess to some other murders that he had done. Right. So they got some closure there. So that was a win. You know what I mean? Even if he didn't really help in this investigation. So even though it seemed like the murders had kind of been winding down or were not as frequent, they actually had not stopped entirely. Between October and December of 1984, there were 2 more bodies found. These were Mary Sue Bello, who was 25, and Martina Otherly, who was 18. Both of these bodies were found off of Highway 410. So at this point, the total body count is 31, although only 28 of them are on the official Green River murder list. 14 women are still missing at this point. March 10th, 1985, another partially buried body found near Star Lake Road. This was 15-year-old Carrie Royce. She had disappeared during the summer of 1983. Mid-June, there was a man bulldozing a patch of land in Oregon, of all places, and he found the skeletal remains of 2 more women. These were Denise Bush, who was 23 years old, and Shirley Sherrill, who was 19 years old. Both of these women were known prostitutes from Seattle. So the fact that they had been found in Oregon over the state line kind of gave police pause, but because both of the girls were from Seattle and because the MO was very similar, they pretty much thought that this was the same killer and that the guy was trying to confuse the police by going over state lines and dumping them farther away. Now, at this stage, and like I said, Ian Brady in this book where he talks about the Green River Killer, who at that stage had not been caught when he wrote it, he believed that this was more than one killer. Now, at this stage, famed FBI profiler John Douglas, he started thinking that maybe this was more than one killer as well. He's like, these killers are similar, like have similar psychologies. Maybe one is a copycat of the other, but he's like, the ways in which they are disposed of, the bodies are disposed of, are slightly different. He's like, because it seems like if this is 2 killers, that one of them was going to more of an effort to conceal the bodies than what the other one was doing. Some of them were buried or left in isolated areas or covered with leaves or garbage or something like that, where some of them were just kind of left out in the open. And this was even going back to the first bodies that they had found. Like Opal Mills, for example, was just found laying on a riverbank. Nobody tried to bury her or cover her with anything. The other 2 bodies that they found at the same time had been like in the water. So he's kind of thinking that maybe this is more than one killer operating. Like I said, I don't know if that's the case or not, or if Gary Ridgway did indeed do all of these and just like changed up his methods. Like I said, that's not impossible. So, even though this seems like a plausible theory, they didn't really have any other evidence to support that other than the slight differences in the MO and in the way the bodies were disposed of. Now, at this stage, this investigation had been going on for more than 3 years. The case had gone cold. They didn't really have any new leads. The public was getting increasingly annoyed with the task force for their seeming inability to catch this killer. So it's kind of like all sort of coming to a head. Now, winter of that year, they found the skeletal remains of 3 more victims. The first of these was Mary West. She was found in a wooded area in Seward Park in Seattle. The other 2 were Kimmy Kai Pitzer, who had disappeared previously, and yet another unidentified white female, believed to be between 14 and 19 years old. Now, I think I mentioned before that Kimmy Pitzer's body had been found previously in December of 1983, but this was interesting too because her body and her skull were found in 2 separate places. And they don't think animals did that. They think the killer did that for whatever reason. They don't know why he took her head elsewhere. But yeah, so that seemed very strange that they had found the skull and then they found the rest of her body somewhere else in a ravine.
Well, you know what that was all about.
Yeah, well, they might have been pulling a Bundy.
Ted Bundy used to do that all the time.
Yeah, that's true.
That's right,
Yeah.
It's all that head pleasure.
Yeah. Ted Bundy, you guys.
Yes.
He fucked heads.
He liked heads literally. He liked to get his head.
Yeah. Which maybe that's not that. I don't know.
You could put it in the refrigerator to keep it over a period of weeks.
I guess this is fucked up to say, but I guess the portability was a factor.
Yeah. But Gary lived it at home with his wife. He couldn't take that home.
True. Although he did say that he had murdered some of the women at the house, so yeah. I don't know. Well, because he had 3 wives, over several years, right. So maybe it was between wives, or maybe
he had an ice chest hidden out there.
It's possible, sure.
You ever think of that?
Yeah.
Put an ice chest out there.
Yeah, he might have had a big
put the head in there
or something like that.
Yeah.
Because, none of his wives ever seemed to, and when they caught him, he was married to his 3rd wife, Judith, and she was, completely shocked.
Yeah.
She's like, she never would have imagined. She's like, he was, such a nice guy. She, never would have imagined that he was a serial killer. She couldn't believe it. But yeah, so she didn't seem to have any idea what was going on. None of his wives really seemed to have any idea what he was up to. But yeah. So let's see. So February 1986, the Green River Task Force, they thought they caught the Green River Killer. So they bring him into the police station. There was like a big media frenzy about it and everything. Though they finally caught the Green River Killer and stuff like that. But the more they interviewed him, the more they realized this was not him. So the public, like I said, are getting really, really fucking pissed off that they can't catch this guy. They keep bringing these suspects into custody, and it's like this big brouhaha gets made about it. It's like, oh, we found him, and then they turn out it's not him. They had the taxi driver, they had that Clark guy who was, he was a rapist, so at least they got him off the street. But it's like, it seemed like, to the public, it seemed like nothing was getting done, and everyone was getting really frustrated. So, and they started seeing them as like a joke. They weren't like taking them seriously anymore. If that wasn't bad enough, that summer they found skeletal remains of yet 3 more women. They found these off of I-90 east of Seattle. These were Maureen Feeney, who was 19, Kim Nelson, who was 26, and another young woman who is unidentified. These were... Maureen Feeney was the only one with a record for prostitution. The other 2 were not. The one was unidentified, obviously, but the other one didn't have any record of prostitution. So at this stage, its victims are almost 40 at this point. That's how many of them there were. So by the end of 1986, even though they had been finding more bodies, because the investigation was not going anywhere, they didn't have any new suspects, new leads, or anything like that. So they started scaling back the task force. They reduced the staff by 40%. The head of it, Adamson, was like reassigned to another project. At this stage, they're just like, they're still trying to catch the guy, but it's just kind of like it's gone on so long that they have to go to other time. There's other crimes that need to be investigated, so they can't like spend so much time, and they just feel like they're spinning their wheels. So they get another guy in to head it. As soon as he comes in, they find 2 more bodies in December. These were actually in Vancouver in British Columbia. So they think, like I said, this seems to be a deliberate move by the killer to confuse the investigation by taking the bodies farther afield. They found, actually, alongside these 2 bodies, they actually found the partial remains of several other bodies too, like no whole ones, but just like pieces of them. But they did, even though these bodies were found way farther away than any of the other victims, the MO was still so similar that they figured this was probably the same killer. So, all right. So, beginning of 1987. So the cops have a new suspect. This suspect was previously known to police. He had been picked up attempting to solicit an undercover police officer who had been posing as a prostitute. This was back in May of 1984. This guy had been released after they gave him a polygraph test, asking him if he was the Green River Killer, and he passed it. However, when they started looking into his background and his past, they actually discovered that he had been accused of choking a prostitute in 1980 near the SeaTac International Airport. Now, in this case, he didn't get in trouble because he said that the prostitute bit him and that it was just self-defense. Like he was just defending himself because she had started it. So I guess they bought that so he didn't get in trouble. So one of the guys on the task force, whose name was Matt Haney, he thought this dude was very suspicious. So he's like, well, I'm going to take a deeper dive like into this dude's background. So he found out that cops had actually stopped and questioned this guy back in 1982 while he was in his truck with a prostitute. Now, the prostitute that he had been with when the police stopped him was one that later turned up dead, Kelly McGinnis. So they had actually approached him again in 1983, And this was the case where Marie Malvar had disappeared and her boyfriend slash pimp had seen her getting into a truck and had found the truck later, and they had gone to Gary Ridgway's house. So this guy on the task force is starting to put all this shit together. So he's like, we think that it's Gary Ridgway. So he starts interviewing Gary Ridgway's ex-wife. Now, the ex-wife says that that Gary would often go to a lot of the places where bodies had been dumped. He started, like, the task force guy also started, like, interviewing a whole bunch of prostitutes. And a lot of prostitutes, when they were shown a picture of Gary Ridgway, did recognize him as someone that had frequented the strip during 1982 and 1983 when a lot of the murders were going on. He actually, on his way to work, he worked as a truck painter. He spray painted trucks like in a factory that made trucks. And that he would go down the strip like pretty much every day, like on his way to work. So they also found out when they looked into his employment records that pretty much every day that one of the prostitutes had gone missing was a day that he had not showed up for work.
Yep.
So,
He'd take the day off and go kill a hooker.
Yeah.
Ain't that some shit?
That's apparently what he was
I don't
doing.
think he killed every hooker, though.
No, because he was like really into prostitutes.
Yeah, I think he was a regular.
He was, yeah.
Yeah, so
I don't think he killed every single one he picked up. Because, like I said, a lot of the prostitutes, when they interviewed him, recognized him.
Yeah.
So I'm assuming that he
business with him. He had a reputation for being a good customer.
Yeah.
So that means, maybe like he only killed 1 out of 5 fucking little tricks he'd do. How much on a bet?
Yeah, maybe. Like
maybe
I said.
Only 1 out of 10.
Yeah.
And I bet you some of those women he killed, he'd already been on dates with them. I'm trying to bet.
And he just decided he's kind of
I'm going to take her today.
got a wild hair.
Probably some shit like that.
Yeah, I think that's probably what it was. Because I definitely do think that he didn't kill every single one.
I still think he was a beta, though, and I still think they kind of fucking dominated him.
Yeah.
I think so.
Sorry, Kitty's like eating the tripod.
She was sitting there laying on her back.
I know, she was. I thought she was sleeping.
With her legs, fucking arms, legs sticking up straight up.
She sleeps like
on
in the middle of the floor.
Yeah, on her back.
And she just like lays on her back with her little legs just like sticking out like that. I think I've got some video of it from like some of the old shows that I put in.
That's relaxation, man. That's total trust.
It's just, it is. It's like that's good though. She knows nothing bad's going to happen to her.
Once she started doing that, the other cat, Beijing, started copying her.
Yeah, our other cat never did that before. No,
they learn.
Until Pookie started doing it.
Yeah.
And then she's like, oh, that looks comfy.
Yeah, and then she does it, yeah.
And it's funny when Beijing does it, because Beijing is like, so, she's a lot bigger than Pookie, but she looks bigger because she's super, super fluffy. Yeah. Like, a lot of it's hair. She's not fat or anything.
No, she's skinny.
She's actually pretty thin, but she just has, like, a lot of hair. So it's like, so when she lays down, it's just this big ball of fluff. Like, lay it on the floor. It's fucking hilarious. But yeah, so the task force is starting to get very suspicious of Gary Ridgway after they've, like, linked all these previous, arrests and stuff like that together. So on April 8th of 1987, they get a warrant and they search his house. They also took samples of his saliva and things of various. They didn't really have DNA, they couldn't really do anything with it, but they figured, we'll just have it like for on record just in case like we need it in the future. So they took all that. And they wanted to compare like blood types and whatever. So at this point, even though they searched his house, they couldn't find enough stuff in his house to link him to the crimes. There wasn't enough evidence to arrest him. So they had to let him go. Like I said, this was 1987. Several weeks later, Captain Pompey, who was the guy at that point on the task force, in charge of the task force, he actually died from a massive heart attack related to a scuba diving accident. Now, the media, I guess, because it's like, had to have a big story or whatever, they tried to tie his death, which was a heart attack, to almost like some other cop had like had him murdered or something like that. They tried to like drum up this big like conspiracy theory about it or something like that. They're trying to call for an investigation. It's like, oh, this is a big cover up and shit like that. Trying
to get some reality.
Right, TV. But yeah, so it was just a heart attack. I mean, the poor guy was probably stressed out and shit like that. So then they get another guy in to head the task force, who was Captain Greg Boyle. Now, In June of that year, this is 1987, if you're keeping track, 3 boys find yet another skeletal remains of a young woman. This girl was identified as Cindy Ann Smith, who was 17 years old. She was found in a ravine behind the Green River Community College. She had been missing for 3 years.
Damn.
No, so they ended up finding like a bunch more bodies of women that had gone missing like in prior years. They ended up finding Debbie Gonzalez, who was 14, a runaway. They found Deborah Estes, who was 15. She had disappeared 6 years earlier. So even though they were still finding bodies, these women had been killed years ago. So they don't think that, I mean, they weren't finding any more like recent bodies. Now, in 1988, they actually found about 20 bodies of prostitutes in San Diego. And for a time, they thought that maybe the Green River Killer had moved there. You know what I mean? So they thought it was the same guy because it was a similar MO. So they actually like kind of, you know, liaisoned with the San Diego Police Department and like to see if they could catch this guy and stuff like that. So while they were doing that, they found this new suspect. Like I said, you know, Gary Ridgway is still on their radar, but they didn't have enough evidence to convict him. So he was just one of many suspects that they were talking about. So one guy that came up during the investigation when they thought that the Green River Killer had moved to San Diego was this guy named William Stevens. Now, they had done a show about these murders on that Crime Stoppers. I guess they still do that show, do they? I don't really know. But you can call in. It's kind of like
TV. What's that?
Yeah. Well, yeah. It's kind of one of those shows where you would like call in and like if you recognize the dude or whatever, 'cause it's like unsolved mysteries. So, so a bunch of people had called in and identified him. Now he had escaped from prison and had been on the run for like 8 years. He had been in prison for burglary. He'd been in there for 2 years before escaping. When the police found him again, he was actually enrolled at the University of Washington as a pharmacology student. So this guy had actually previously been investigated as a suspect in the Green River killings. He did not like prostitutes and did not make a secret of that. He had also told several people that he wanted to murder them. They searched his house and they found a whole bunch of guns, several driver's licenses, credit cards in different aliases, a bunch of like sexually explicit, like pornographic photos of like known prostitutes and stuff like that. He actually made his living through robbery and credit card fraud. So for a time, they thought that this guy was the Green River Killer. So they interviewed him about it. They searched his house. This was in summer and fall of 1989. They searched his dad's house, but they couldn't find anything linking him to any of the victims. Now, and as they investigated him further, they also found out that by tracking his credit card records and stuff like that, that when some of the Green River victims had disappeared, he was demonstrably like in another state, in another city, something like that. So they knew that he couldn't have done most of them, because during the months when the Green River killings were going on, he was actually like kind of traveling around the country and had like credit card, receipts like to show that where he had been. So in October of 1989, they found 2 more young women's skeletal remains. One of these victims was Andrea Childers. She was found in a vacant lot near Star Lake. She was actually really decomposed, so they couldn't tell how she had died. In February of 1990, they found Denise Bush's skull. They had found her body previously in Oregon 5 years earlier. So this was another case where the body was dumped separately from the head. So this seemed to be a case where the killer's like deliberately moving the bodies around in order to confuse the investigation. So he can't have been that dumb. Now, during this time, just because these more skeletal remains keep turning up, these are like old bodies, you know, women that went missing a long time ago, and they're not getting any new leads. They seem to be getting nowhere with the suspects and everything like that. So at this stage, July of 1991, the task force was actually reduced to just one guy named Tom Jensen, because this had been, you know, this task force had been going for 9 years. At this point, there were 49 victims.
So they put that shit on the
They
back
had
burner.
spent $15 million,
Damn.
and they still had not caught the guy, and everyone was just over it.
Well, they realized that they weren't gonna solve this case by police work.
Yeah.
Because he wasn't leaving any evidence, and that's what police work's all about.
Yep.
He was gonna have to be caught red-handed, or he's gonna have to be caught by a witness or something. So they just said, "Fuck it, we're just gonna sit back and let him kill until he makes a mistake." That's what they were thinking.
Well, what they were actually waiting for was for
So I was wrong?
DNA technology to catch
Okay.
up. That's
Okay.
what they were waiting for. Because they did actually have physical evidence. They had saliva and stuff like that, and they had like a lot of physical evidence, like semen and things like
But
that,
they weren't
from
gonna
the
catch
sites.
him. They weren't gonna catch him by investigating.
No, well, yeah,
Yeah.
they
Not
had
that
found
way.
they had found suspects, but none of them were
Right.
the guy. And like I said, they had turned up at Gary Ridgway's house and had investigated him, and he was like one of their prime suspects. But when they searched his house, they couldn't find anything. They couldn't find enough
So
evidence.
they were
to,
waiting
like, hold
on
him.
science.
Pretty much.
Waiting on science, or waiting for him to make a mistake.
Yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, at this stage, task force is now just one dude. You know what I mean? So the case kind of went cold for about a decade. April of 2001. This is almost 20 years after the first known Green River murder. Detective Reichert, who at this stage was the sheriff of King County, where the murders had taken place, he decided he was going to essentially reopen the investigation because he was frustrated by the lack of effort on it. He's like, God damn it, we're going to find out who the fuck is doing this, because it was kind of driving him crazy. So he actually formed a new task force in 2001, and it had 6 members. This also had a couple of detectives, but it also had a bunch of DNA and like forensic specialists as well, because he knew that they had all of this forensic evidence that they had been waiting for the DNA to be good enough, like the DNA evidence. Because remember, back in the old days, even in the 90s, they could do DNA, but you had to, if you only had like a couple of molecules of the DNA, it would destroy it.
Yeah.
Later on, by 2001, they had that thing where they could like copy. Like they could
Right.
make like endless copies of the
replicate.
DNA so they could replicate it.
Yeah.
So in that sense, you didn't have to like destroy your only, evidence.
Yeah, I think it's called amplification.
Something,
You get
it's something like
one,
that.
and
It's
then
like
all of
a
a sudden you can clone them into billions of copies.
Yeah. So that's what they were waiting for, because when I was watching like the documentaries, like the investigators were like, we were keeping tabs on like how the DNA shit was going, because we did ask them to test these DNA samples, but they said, well, hey, this is like it was like a tiny bit like on a piece of gauze. Like they had asked Gary Ridgway to like bite into a piece of gauze. So it was like some saliva. And it's like, they're like, well, there's not really enough of this. They're like, we have to destroy all of this to do the test, and you probably don't want to do that. But, they did know at that point that they were trying to work on making it better so they could like actually replicate it and stuff like that. So the cops were aware of that, and they were like waiting for that to happen so they could like get the evidence. So, so once that came about, they started sending the forensic samples that they had to the labs. Now, the first samples that they sent to the lab were for the 3 victims that were found in the Green River initially. This was Opal Mills, Marcia Chapman, and Carol Christensen, who were all found on the same day. These were semen samples. So they sent these to the lab, and as I said, since Gary Ridgway was one of their prime suspects, they compared his DNA that they had taken from his saliva with these semen samples found on the body. Now, it's interesting because they had Detective Reichert on the documentary, and he said the guy comes in from the lab with like an envelope, and he's like, we got a match. And he said, it's Ridgway, isn't it? Like he knew that that's who it was going to be.
Yeah.
And he's like, he opened it, and there was his fucking mugshot. And he's like, yep, it was like a perfect match. So,
got his ass.
Yep, they got his ass. So like I said, they had a good idea that it was him. They just didn't have enough to get it. They were just like waiting.
See, he was fucking sitting back there at his house just sleeping soundly for all those decades. They'll never catch me. They'll never catch me. And yeah, fucking they did.
Yeah.
DNA showed up. He didn't even know that existed. He didn't even know that was going to exist.
Yeah.
They got ways, man.
Nowadays they'll catch your ass. Holy shit.
They got ways.
Yeah, it's like nobody was thinking about that in the 80s.
Nowadays they got fucking electronic ways. Because, all these damn appliances can probably fucking listen to you. For all I mean, they're
your
making...
fridge is listening
your refrigerator's
to you right now.
listening to you, There's no telling One of these days they might enact some kind of damn AI program to just find everybody who's committed a crime, and just lock everybody up simultaneously. Just fuck it. Make the whole United States a prison, like something out of damn Escape from New York.
Escape from New York.
You're all fucking criminals.
But it's like it wouldn't be any different. I mean, if you just made the U.S. a big prison, it's like I don't think
it is now.
Yeah, you would.
You guys are all criminals. Fuck you guys.
You wouldn't notice any difference.
Yeah.
So initially, when they arrested Gary Ridgway in November of 2001, they charged him with 4 aggravated murder counts, because those were the ones that with the DNA matches, and they also had other circumstantial evidence like tying him into those murders. So so they got him in custody, and they're like, all right, we are not letting this motherfucker go right now. So let's talk a little bit about Gary Ridgway's past, like now that they got him in custody, and now we can like talk about
funny looking little fucker.
He is kind of, So
kind of like, imagine if Alfred E. Newman was a goddamn serial killer. Or Luigi.
How do we know he's not?
Yeah, it's true. Like, and I just realized that probably half these people listening are too young to even know who Alfred E. Newman is. There's a dude from Mad Magazine.
I know, it's like every time I make a reference, to like something from the 70s or something, I always think to myself, it's like, wow, there's probably some like 22-year-old that doesn't fucking know. Although I have to say, like, how fucking funny it is that I'm always surprised that sometimes people that are really young, because like I was watching this shit the other day, I was watching a review of Looker, like before we did our review. Yeah. And the guy was talking to this girl and she was 22, and they said something about some song, and I guess like the song he was talking about was by like D. Antwoord or whoever. Mm-hmm. But it's like she immediately went to Hall & Oates. Right, and she was 22. Right, yeah. But she didn't know the newer song. She knew the old one.
She knew Hall & Oates, yeah.
So I thought that was very funny that it's like she was kind of like she knew the Hall & Oates song immediately, but didn't know the new one.
Yeah, well, it's funny because a lot of young people are going back to the 70s and 80s music, because that's kind of like cultural roots back into that stuff.
True.
Because the new music of today is just corporate garbage. I mean, it's terrible.
Well, and two, I think a lot of it is homaging that from back then, and I think a lot of people. I mean, because it's the same as like when I got into like post-punk and stuff like that in the early 80s. And all these bands that I liked were like, oh, we really liked like the Velvet Underground and stuff like that. So I went back and got into that stuff because that's what was like inspiring, like who I liked. So,
but no, a person that's 22 can go back and like listen to a U2 album, like fucking,
well,
Joshua
it's so much
Tree.
Easier nowadays.
Yeah, you can listen to Joshua Tree or listen to a Duran Duran album, or you can listen.
It almost seems like it doesn't matter when the shit came out because everything's just kind of out there.
Yeah, and it's because of the human quality of the lyrics and everything. You can still relate to it. Yeah. It's it's a lot more relatable.
It's kind of timeless, yeah.
Yeah, it's more relatable than like damn corporate garbage that's coming out that doesn't have any content in it. I mean, when I was a kid, I was listening to Jimi Hendrix. That was way before my time.
True. Like
I listened to the Doors. That was way before my time.
Yeah, I was really into the Beatles when I was a kid, and that was like because my dad really liked them, and I really liked them too, and that was before I was.
I'd go back and listen to Led Zeppelin and shit, and I was thinking about, oh man, this was ancient history, and it was only like 10 years old.
I know, it seemed like it was so funny because like when I was like getting into the Beatles and stuff like that, I'm like, oh my god, it's so old.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I liked it, but it's like but it was only like 10 or 20 years old at that point. It was like really funny to think about. But yeah. So Gary Ridgway, he was actually born in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I know what you're thinking, but no, he's not a Mormon. He's actually a Baptist. So he was born in 1949. He was the middle of 3 brothers. When he was arrested, he actually worked for a computer company. But prior to that, for 30 years, he had a job as a truck painter at the Kentworth Truck Factory in Renton, Washington. His parents, it seemed like he had like kind of a weird upbringing. He had his mom, a lot of serial killers have this. His mom was very domineering. Neighbors also said that she was an attractive woman, but also that she wasn't like one of the women that they interviewed on this documentary was like a schoolmate of Gary's brother, like older brother. And they knew Gary because he was just like the younger brother, you know what I mean? Because he was like the quiet one. Like the older brother was like more friendly and outgoing. So she said that their mom was like not like any of our moms because it's like she had this really big bouffant. it's like she wore all this makeup, and she wore like kind of provocative clothing, let's put it like that. They're like, she always wore like little tight shorts and like really low cut shirts and stuff like that. And they think, and I think Gary Ridgway actually kind of admitted this, that he almost had kind of like a sexual attraction to his mom, but also he kind of hated her. You know what I mean? So it was like this really weird conflict because...
weird Oedipus conflict.
Yeah, it definitely did seem very much like that. And also she seemed like, I mean, her and her husband fought all the time. Gary Ridgway was a bedwetter, as a lot of serial killers are. You know, that's a very common thing from their childhoods, is a lot of them are bedwetters. And what would happen is when he would wet the bed when he was a kid, like his mom would come in immediately and get him and put him in the tub and wash him, like in the middle of the night, and like washes, you know, balls and stuff.
Damn.
And I guess that
this became a sexual ritual.
It became like kind of a thing, because I think like one of the people that was interviewed for the documentary, they said that at one point when this was happening, like his mom's robe fell open and she was like naked under there, and he was kind of like sexually aroused by that.
How do they know about that?
And also, I guess he said about it.
Right.
So he had like this really weird kind of like sexual fixation on his mom. It seemed.
How old
like,
was he when this is going on?
I'm not really sure. I guess he was pretty young.
Okay.
But so he had like this really weird like relationship with his mom, where he kind of, because a lot of the neighbors said, you know, she was a good looking woman, and she would like go around like in kind of slutty, I don't want to say slutty, but you know, kind of, you know, revealing clothing, I guess. And she was
That's some weird shit.
Always trying to look glamorous and everything.
That's some weird shit, because I don't care how good looking your mom is. I mean, I don't think it's normal to be just attracted to your mom.
It's not normal, no.
I don't, yeah, that's kind of weird.
Yeah. Well, it's just kind of like, it's not normal
Guess it
to
takes
be
a special guy.
Yeah. It's not normal to be attracted to anybody in your
family. Yeah.
I mean, I could see maybe cousins, because you don't grow up with them.
Yeah.
But generally, there's a thing where you are not sexually attracted to people that you grew up in a house with. Even if they're not like blood relation, like if you were adopted into a family, say, or stepsisters or whatever, they don't usually... That's a thing.
Yeah, I think I read there's some kind of like a safety mechanism that usually happens.
Usually, because usually the people you grow up with
it's about psychology,
related to you, and you don't want to...
They're demystified. You don't have any interest in them.
Yeah, and also I think it's kind of like a safety mechanism whereby, you know, prevent inbreeding, because, you know, that obviously causes a lot of problems. Yeah. But like you said, it takes a special person to
a special kind of person.
Override. So apparently he had kind of a thing for his mom at some point. So there was also a thing where his dad, who seemed his dad was like real religious, and I think this is where Gary got his thing about prostitutes, because his dad would always be like, his fucking prostitutes, whores, blah, 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 but then he would go to prostitutes. Right. So I feel like that's kind of where Gary got that, because Gary had the same kind of thing, where he thought he was always complaining about prostitutes, like they were filthy whores, and he complained about them in the neighborhood, but he would go to them anyway. You know what I mean?
Well, it was cheap.
I guess, yeah. You did your BTK voice there for a second. So,
oh man, BTK.
Yeah, I know. I still got to read that book too, and like I said, you should read that book in like you said in your BTK voice. Yeah. Do you think you could sustain that over like 8 or 10 hours? Or however long?
I'm sure I probably could.
You probably could.
Yeah.
You don't have to do it all at once. Yeah. We'll do a whole episode like that with you. Like I said, we need to do an offshoot show of you just like giving people terrible advice, like as BTK, like the kind of advice that BTK would give somebody. So like really, really awful.
Ridgway made a lot of mistakes. Hold on, where is
his little head isn't in it?
Yeah, Ridgway's made a lot of mistakes. Hold on, I can't. I'm not in the mood.
You're not in the mood.
I'm not in the mood.
Okay,
it almost started coming, but
but then you were like, no. So when Gary Ridgway was in school, he had his IQ tested, and it was 82.
Damn, dumb as a rock.
So yeah, he actually had to repeat a grade or two in high school because of his dumbness.
Yeah.
Aside from that, though, like his schoolmates they said he was real quiet, but they didn't really think They said he seemed friendly enough. Like, he wasn't super memorable or anything like that. They said he just kind of faded into the background. There wasn't anything, like, that stood out about him. Like, he wasn't mean or anything like that. However, when he was 16 years old, he actually, I guess it was a neighbor boy who was 6, and I guess they were kind of playing, like, out in the yard, and he lured the 6-year-old boy into a bush and stabbed him in the liver.
Damn.
The kid survived. And I guess Gary didn't get into trouble because I don't know how that happened.
Kid, yeah.
But yeah, and later he said that he just wondered what it would be like to kill someone. He wasn't really mad at the kid or anything like that. He just wondered what it would be like. So he stabbed the kid, but the kid lived. So when he was about 18 years old, he was still in high school, like I said, because he got held back once or twice. He actually ended up joining the Navy. After graduation, he married his high school girlfriend, whose name was Claudia Barrows. He ended up actually going to Vietnam. He was on board a supply ship, and he did actually see combat. I believe he was in the Army for 2 years.
So Navy and Army.
Or in the Navy for 2 years.
Okay, in the
rather.
Navy for 2 years.
Yeah,
okay.
That's what I meant to say.
So it was, yeah.
So
it was actually during that period he was probably drafted.
No, he joined.
He joined.
Yeah.
Okay.
He joined.
With an 80-something IQ.
Yeah.
Guess the standards were lower back then.
In the Navy, I guess they just wanted all the people like, well,
supply ship. You know, depends on what job he was going for. Probably, probably just manual labor.
Yeah, that's probably all.
Yeah, moving boxes and shit.
Yeah. So while he was in the military, he started spending a lot of time with prostitutes. He had contracted gonorrhea from a prostitute earlier in his life. However, while he was in the military, he got gonorrhea again.
Gotcha.
He got, and this is stupid. It was like, so he got gonorrhea a second time, and then he got mad at the prostitutes for giving him gonorrhea.
They should have told him. That's in his mind. Should have told him.
Even though
he should have wore a
but
damn
he still,
rubber.
well, yeah, and then he still kept going and
Yeah.
still kept not using a condom. So
you're
somehow
reading
this
into
is like the fucking prostitute's fault.
You're reading into it too much.
I'm not reading into it. This is like this is very typical of this type of dude.
He's not killing him because of the gonorrhea.
I'm just saying that
he just got mad. I forgot. She burned me. Yeah.
That's what I mean. Well,
he goes back.
I'm not saying that that's what made him a serial killer.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that it's typical of this type of dude that they go to a prostitute and have sex with a prostitute without a condom.
Yeah.
And then get gonorrhea and then blame her.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Well, the dude's dumb. I mean, 80 something. You're talking about the dude's an idiot.
Yeah.
You know?
Now at
85, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Basically.
82.
82, you're an idiot.
82.
100 is like average.
Yeah.
But 100 is dumb. Dumb as fuck. Okay, that's really dumb. If you ask me. Okay.
Yeah.
100's average, but that's pretty fucking dumb. You start talking about 80. There's no difference between 80 and 82. 80's fucking dumb.
Yeah.
Really dumb. I think 60 is mentally retarded.
I think so. I'm not sure what the
60 or 70
cutoff is. It's something like that.
Something like that. Functionally mentally retarded.
Yeah. So, so he's in the military banging all his prostitutes, getting gonorrhea and stuff like that. Meanwhile, his poor wife, Claudia, who was only 19 years old, she was left alone at home and, understandably, started dating other dudes. Even though Gary was humping prostitutes, apparently this made his wife a whore. So it's like he can be a whore, but not her. So he divorced her. They were only married for a year or two. So he was actually married 3 times. His first 2 marriages resulted in divorce because of affairs by both partners, both him and his wife. Now his second wife, Marcia, she said that he was violent, that he had put her in a chokehold at one point. Also during this marriage, for whatever reason, he got religion. Now, he had been raised Baptist, and I think his dad was kind of religious, but it doesn't seem like during his school years he was that into it. However, during his second marriage, he got full on into it. He was like reading the Bible every day and crying over it. He was like going door to door, like, preaching at people. He was like, hanging out in the church all the time with the pastor and whatnot. And he was trying to get his wife to go along with this pastor being like, all the shit they had about women in the church and everything like that. So he was trying to get her to go along with that. So he got very, very strictly religious at this point. And even though he still considered prostitutes filthy whores, yet he still kept going to them. And as I mentioned earlier, Marcia, his second wife, and his other wives and his other girlfriends said this as well, that he had a thing for sex in inappropriate places. Like, he was always trying to get them to have sex, like, out in public, where they might get caught, or, you know, like, out in the woods and stuff like that. And actually...
he had that fetish.
Yeah, so actually, and Marcia said that they had sex at a few places where he would later end up dumping bodies.
Damn.
So, that must be nice to find out about your fucking husband.
He's like drawing a connection between the two. It's group sex in his mind.
That's probably what it is.
Yeah.
They also, and all his wives and his ex-girlfriends also all said the same thing, that he was sexually voracious, that he would demand sex several times a day and would get very upset if they did not comply.
So he had limited impulse control. That's what they're talking about.
Definitely.
And sometimes you got guys they're not mentally all there. That's their main thing.
Yeah.
They can't really control impulses. They just kind of go with their feelings, and their feelings dominate them. So, yeah, okay.
Yeah. So
they're operating at a very low level.
Yeah. It does seem like he had very, very low impulse control.
Yeah.
Not only in the, sexual voraciousness, but also look at how many people he killed and how close together that was.
He couldn't be satisfied.
Yeah, it just seemed like he was kept picking them up like once a week or something like that.
Yeah.
It's just like, fucking hell.
Yeah.
So, so in 1975, he also had a son by his second wife, whose name was Matthew. This son, when he was a little kid, at one point, I think he was even in the car when Gary, solicited a prostitute. And also, he used pictures of the kid to, make the prostitutes feel better. Like, look, I'm a family man. I have a little son. Yeah. Like I said, he did have a son. It wasn't a bullshit. But he used that as kind of used him as kind of like a prop, to. He was
trying to get him
to disarm them.
Yeah.
Pretty much. So, yeah. So there might have been a kind of thing where, because it does seem like his religious thing, that wasn't faked. That wasn't bullshit. But it did seem like, and I think we've talked about this before about serial killers that are raised in really, really strict religious households. I think they have these kind of it's almost like a self-hatred, because it's like they feel this, in Gary Ridgway's case, maybe like a sexual, being insatiable, but they feel like guilt or like a self-hatred about it. So it's almost like a weird, self-flagellation type of conflict going on. I feel like that's probably something.
It could be, but then again, it could also just be that he's just dumb.
Well, that's always a possibility.
You might be reading into it too much. You know what I mean? It might just be that he doesn't see any conflicts between any of this. Because to see the conflict, you kind of have to understand things.
Yeah.
And when you don't have much understanding, you don't see any conflict. You know
I guess not. But
he might think he's a holy church man and he's good, and raping whores is no big deal.
Well, I do kind of feel like he might not have, because some of the shit that he said, during some of his interviews, and like you said, yes, you can't believe what they say, truth and everything like that. I don't know if he's smart enough to come up with any elaborate stories or anything, but it's some of the stuff that he said leads me to believe that he didn't necessarily, I'm not saying that he didn't think he was doing anything wrong, but I think he knew it was wrong.
But maybe he didn't know why he was doing it.
But I don't, one, I don't think he really knew why he was doing it. And two, I don't really think he thought it was that big of a deal.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I do really feel like...
I don't think he had any insight to it.
I don't think he saw prostitutes as people. I think he just saw them as objects. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that he didn't feel any compunction about killing them. It's weird because his third wife, Judith, like I said, who was married to him when he was caught and was completely shocked because she thought he was just a great guy. She's like, he was totally nice and he wasn't abusive to her or anything like that. And he actually really did seem to love her. Once he married the third wife, it seemed like the murders trailed off. Yeah. He still killed people, but not as many as he would have.
Not as many. Yeah, he cut back.
Right? Which is fucked up to say, but it's so he did seem to she did seem to have some kind of effect, and she did say that too. She felt like she's like, maybe I actually saved some people because he would have killed more people if I hadn't been around, which probably would have been the case. You know what I mean?
I kind of suspect that we're reading into it.
I don't know
that he's just doing what he feels like doing, and he doesn't really understand enough about himself to you know what I mean?
Yeah. But the thing about it, though, is that just because a person doesn't understand why they're doing something doesn't mean that there aren't reasons that they're doing it that other people might be more insightful and be able to.
Pookie goes out and kills frogs. She doesn't even damn eat them. But she kills frogs.
Frogs taste yucky.
Yeah, and then she's just like, oh, it's dead. And then comes in and just like, hey, what's up? And forgets all about it.
I kind of feel like that's how Gary Ridgway thought about prostitutes.
Yeah, that's probably what you're talking about there. He's just like...
He did say that he hated them.
Yeah.
And like I said, that might have been from his upbringing, because it does seem like his dad had a very similar kind of view toward it, but he was always like, filthy whores, blah, blah, blah. But then he still went and had sex with them anyway.
Yeah, I don't think I don't think he saw any kind of conflict in that. Like, they're bad.
I don't think he was conscious of it, but I do think that there was something like that psychologically going on. I just don't think that he was aware of it.
No, I don't think he's aware of it either.
I don't think he was aware of it.
I don't think there was much to this guy. It's just mostly just dumb and impulse.
Yeah.
And habits. And thrills.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Physical thrills. Killing him must have been thrilling to him. It must have made him feel powerful. That's all I think.
But obviously it wasn't like...
It wasn't very satisfying.
It wasn't because he kept doing it over and over. And it was like really close together.
And I think it ended up being where it wasn't a big deal.
I think that's exactly what happened. I mean, I really think that...
And he wasn't even losing sleep over it.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's like it didn't happen.
Yeah.
So,
So, like I said, when they interviewed his wife, Judith, his third wife, she said, like I said, she had no idea. She said, now, when we moved in together, they've been dating for like 3 years or something like that. They moved in together before they got married. And she said when she moved into the house, there was no carpet, which she thought was a little weird. But he said, oh, well, my kid was in here and he peed on the carpet, so I got rid of it, and I haven't gotten rid of it, and I haven't, like, replaced it yet. And the cop said, well, probably he wrapped a body in that carpet. So,
Got blood on it.
But later she said, oh, well, he used to leave for work early all the time. Like, said that he was getting overtime. Like, he was going for all these early morning shifts and stuff like that. And she's like, in hindsight, probably he was going and picking up prostitutes and fucking killing them and dumping them in the morning. Can you fucking imagine? I can't fucking imagine. She seemed like a nice lady.
I know one thing, during his interrogations, he said he was going back to some of those bodies, and the cops were doing the math on the dates, and we're talking about 3 or 4 weeks, and 3 weeks after the death.
He was talking about having to push maggots aside and stuff. You guys.
Yeah. And so, like, they're living 3 or 4 weeks, and this is like during the summer, and they're like, she was rotten, and they're like, and he was like, yeah. And why'd you do it? Well, because it was free.
Well, because he didn't want to have to pay them for it. Yeah. I think that's why he ended up killing a lot of them, too, because he's like, he wanted to have sex with them, but he didn't want to pay for it.
He's pushing the maggots aside?
That's pretty much, yeah.
That's what he said, yeah.
Or they said that, like, in a documentary, that it's like, in some cases, like, one of the guys that interviewed him said, he was like, he said, oh, well, after a while it wasn't as fun because I had to push maggots aside and stuff like that, so it wasn't as...
Nasty.
And the detective was just like horrified because he's just talking like it's like fucking regular, like I'm talking to you right now. It was a female detective.
I wonder how he got that smell off of him.
See, that's another, like, I'm kind of fascinated. I know this is fucked up, but I'm kind of fascinated by like the practical concerns of this kind of stuff. It's like,
maybe that's why it was near the water, because he would jump in the water. And like maybe he must have taken all his clothes off.
I guess so.
And then jumped on them down.
Because shit, man, if you did that and then you came home, it's like the second you walked in the door, it was like, oh my god, it smells like a fucking corpse in here.
He must have
very
just
distinctive
taken
smell.
all them clothes off. He's looking at that rotten body, going, oh yeah. I'm going to get me some of that right there. Oh, yes, girl. You know what I'm talking about? That kind of shit. He's taking his clothes off, and then he jumps on there and fucking just going to town on it, Just going swashbuckler on this fucking...
On a
rotten,
dead body.
Yeah. And then he
decomposed.
Yeah, and then he gets up, you know what I mean? He's got all that fucking slime on him and shit. Fucking nasty. And then he gets down in the water and just washes off and puts his clothes back on. Must have brought a bar of soap with him. Did he say anything about that?
Oh, I don't think he did. I wonder if he thought that much ahead.
You'd have to, because
that's what I mean, because just
be
water
walking around-
isn't going to get that
No,
smell off. I'm sorry.
Because you'd
it's
walk
not.
around smelling like a fucking dead body.
Yeah, and everybody would know.
Everybody would know.
What that was.
So I would think you'd have to bring a bar.
Everybody knows what a dead body smells like.
You'd think you'd have to bring a bar of soap with you.
God, maybe he did.
Yeah.
That is so fucking messed up, man.
Bar of soap and some cologne and shit like that. Try to get all that stuff off you. Maybe some palm olive. Maybe like a big old thing of palm olive. Taking, what? Because we're talking about, nearly a month dead.
Yeah,
Maggots.
some of them it was like weeks and months.
Yeah.
Like when he went back there.
And there might be another one right near there, just even more rotten. You know what I mean? And
Ted Bundy did that shit too.
He's a necrophile. See, he's just not telling the truth. So he's bearing
Well, Bundy
down.
was like that too. It's
Yeah.
like he would talk about killing people, but it's like he was really reluctant to talk about necrophilia.
details, yeah.
Because I feel like he still knew, oh, that's pretty gross, and it's like, I don't
Yeah.
really want to, like, oh, killing people, that's okay, but it's like,
Yeah.
fucking a dead body, yeah, people might think less of me because of that. Is that what they were
want to
thinking?
talk about that, and we're talking about these bodies were rotten.
That's what I mean. It's like, I feel like, okay,
Yeah.
like, I can understand, like, because a lot of killers that have, lot of serial killers that have necrophilic tendencies, they generally have that because they like to have complete control over a victim.
They don't want some woman watching them.
They don't want someone watching them, you know what I mean, because they like, get performance anxiety or something like that. But, I almost can see that, but when it gets to a point where the body is decomposed...
Yeah.
What are they getting out of it then?
Could be that what they don't want to admit is that that's where the real fetish is.
That's what I'm saying.
Could be
there
that-
has to be because, like I said, if you just have a thing where it's like, oh well, I like to have sex with women who won't watch me or won't like talk back, and I can do whatever I want to them. It's like you would think that they would just do it when they were like freshly
and then you
dead,
stop doing
and
it.
then stop. But the fact that they go back after the women are rotten,
Yeah, it makes me think that was the goal.
and
That
they just
didn't-
don't want to say
They
that.
didn't want to say it
because they know how
but
gross
what they
that is.
what they really wanted was some chick that was rotten with a bunch of maggots on them. That was what turned them on.
Yeah, and like you said, maybe they were just like
they didn't-
embarrassed.
they
They,
didn't want
actually
that.
had shame about
Yeah,
that.
maybe that's what it was.
It had to be,
It's more logical.
because like I said, I can see why psychologically, having sex with a dead woman would be appealing to a certain type of serial killer,
But not rotten.
but not rotten.
No.
That's what I mean. That's a different
No,
issue
I'm thinking that it was the rotten that they were into.
that they were into.
Yeah.
I kind of suspect that as well.
I kind of think it might have been.
and I think, and I
I think
think
Bundy was into that
Bundy
too.
was into that too, because, and I think that the fact that he was really into it kind of played into the fact that he was like really reluctant to talk about it.
Yeah, he didn't want to look like a fucking filthy scumbag. He tried to elevate himself
because he was
by-
trying to be
he
like,
was trying to be.
look how clean cut and
Yeah.
normal I am and shit like
Trying
that.
to be the Errol Flynn of fucking
Of serial
killers.
killers, even though he was just like a
But really,
scumbag,
what it
just
was,
like
he
the
was
rest
into
of them.
them rotten bodies and heads.
Yeah.
He just didn't want to say it.
Yeah, I think that's the case with this guy too. It's just like this guy, he seemed to have less compunction about admitting it, although he didn't say like he was into like the rotting bodies. He just said he liked to go back and
Probably goes back to certain types of infantilism and little kids playing with dead things.
yeah,
A lot of little boys will play
They
with
do,
dead
yeah.
things. I play with dead things. We all did. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? Find a dead dog on the railroad tracks, flip him over.
yeah,
That kind of stuff.
That's
you know?
not that unusual.
That's not that unusual.
I mean, little girls do that too.
Yeah. So
Probably not as common, but-
somehow it's probably like a guy at that stage of life somehow becomes sexualized, and then the two
Yeah.
merge to where there's a sexual arousal by fucking something that's dead and rotten with a bunch of maggots in it.
Yeah,
And then somehow it's linked with kind of like a resentment a resentment towards women.
yeah,
And it's all kind of merged together, and feelings of inadequacy. So you're dealing with really somebody who's got the mind of a perverted child, really.
yeah,
Okay?
yeah. That makes
That
sense.
starts to make more sense to me.
Yeah,
Because when you look at Ridgway with like the damn 82 IQ and just the way he is and the beta and shit like that, you're dealing with somebody who hasn't really developed mentally. It's like a child.
yeah,
Like a child on a railroad tracks playing with a dead dog
yeah,
and trying to fuck the dead dog. It's like that.
yeah. Like you said, like the sex and the death become
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
interspersed
That's-
at a young age, and
It's
they
gonna
never
be
get past
something
it.
like it's gonna be something more like that.
But yeah, so In 2001, as I said, he was arrested. Now, initially, they only really had enough solid evidence to do 7 counts of murder. However, he plea bargained. He said, if I confess to all these other ones, and he actually led them to like a bunch more bodies and stuff like that, then he would not get the death penalty. So he ended up confessing to initially 48 murders, and later another one was in 2003, I believe. Another one was added, so it was 49 counts. And as I said, he did actually lead them to some of the bodies that they had not discovered yet, so they know that, he probably did that. So, as I said, he couldn't get the death penalty, so he got 49 life sentences to serve concurrently, so he will never, ever get out of jail. He's still alive, like I said. He's 70 years old, and he is in prison, as of this moment, in Walla Walla, Washington. 49 murders.
Yeah.
And he thought that it was probably more like 71.
Yeah.
And I don't doubt it.
Yeah, old Gary Ridgway.
I don't doubt it. Not in the least. So
Fuck
yeah.
that dude. Fuck that dude.
Well, pretty much. All these fucking scumbags we talk about on this show. Like I said, we still got to do... Fuck, man. We still got to do Ed Gein. We still got to do Aileen Wuornos. We still got to do John Wayne Gacy. I think we're going to do John Wayne Gacy next month, maybe.
That dude makes me mad.
They all make me mad.
Yeah.
It's like you can't do anything about it, but it's like... they're just all terrible people. Yeah. And yet, it's like, I don't know why.
He's like a Dean Coral type dude.
Yeah.
I think Coral was fucking more worse. I think he was worse, though, with the torture. Although they both were fucking terrible. They were bad.
That's what I mean. It's like, it's hard getting into, like, matter of degree, because it's like they all suck, pretty much.
Gay rapist torturer.
They're, terrible.
Yeah.
It's, like, terrible. All right, so we've probably gone way long enough, and I'm getting kind of sleepy.
Yeah.
It's kind of late, but I didn't sleep very good last night, so I'm kind of getting tired. I'm actually amazed I made it through the show without
you did good.
fucking up too bad.
No, you did good.
But well, I have meticulous notes. That's why, so I could just read from that if I couldn't remember what I was talking about. All right, so we're gonna wrap up episode 178 about the Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway. Hope you guys enjoyed our rambling discussion. And remember, if you like the show, like, share, subscribe on all your social media. Tell all your friends and family about us. Anybody that you think might be interested, let them know. If you'd like to financially support the show, it would be much appreciated, of course. You can go to our Patreon page, patreon.com/13o'clockpodcast, or you can go to our blog, 13o'clockpodcast.wordpress.com, and there's a button in the sidebar to a PayPal account that goes right to yours truly if you'd like to give a one-time donation. Again, much appreciated. So that'll do it for this episode. We will see you guys next time. Bye.